Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting for September 2nd, 2020. We will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum, just barely, but we are all here and can conduct business. So our first item will be to approve the minutes of the August 5th, 2020 and August 19th, 2020 Planning Commission meetings. Did we have any additions or corrections to the minutes that were submitted?
There are none. I'll move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And I believe we have 8 public hearings tonight, so we will get started with those. The first one is a zoning application for approximately 0.4 acres located at 206 Dill Lane to be rezoned from RS-15 to RS-8. The Journey Home, Inc. is the applicant. Good evening, Ms. Green.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Our first public hearing this evening is for you to consider a zoning application made by Journey Home, and it's for property that's located at 206 Dill Lane, and that is on the west side of Dill Lane. This property does currently have 2 structures on it, and the applicants do own the property already. They purchased the property in 2014, or they acquired the property in 2014 from the City of Murfreesboro, and they desire to continue their mission here and to create 2 separate lots of record to have 2 single-family homes to provide housing for people in our community. The property is just under half an acre, and it is currently zoned RS-15, that's single-family residential district, with a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. The current zoning is not, under the current zoning, they cannot create 2 lots, 2 separate lots. And so that's the impetus for the rezoning request to go down from a 15,000 square foot lot to an 8,000 square foot lot. And so that's why their desire is to rezone it from RS-15 to RS-8. You can see the surrounding zoning in this area. There's several different zoning districts. There's RM-12, which is multifamily residential district with a density of 12 dwelling units per acre. CH is commercial highway district. CL is local commercial district. And RM-16 is similar to RM-12, except it has a higher density. So as you can see, there's several different zoning districts within this area. Just to the south is a PCD, planned commercial district. And the future land use map does recommend that this area develop auto-urban multifamily, and the use is not inconsistent with that future land use map, and that the lots are smaller, but it is not a multifamily use. But I think staff is still in support of creating single-family lots in this area instead of multifamily lots because the lots are so small, and it would be difficult to do a well-designed multifamily development on a property that's a half acre. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. There are representatives of the applicant here this evening. They have provided just an exhibit in the packet to show you what the 2 lots might look like. It would be a traditional lot and a flag lot, and each of those lots would be able to meet those standards under the RS-8 zones. There'd be no need for a variance. Some of the information on the exhibit is just for your review. It's not for plat review. In the future, when they want to re-subdivide this property, it will have to come back before you for that approval. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Otherwise, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Green before the public hearing? Okay. Then we will open the public hearing and ask anybody that would like to come forward to speak either for or against this item to please come forward, state your name and address at the podium, and make all your comments to the Planning Commission, please. Anybody at all? Okay, we will close the public hearing and ask if there are any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission.
I would have one. The use of a flag lot, Ms. Green, is that normal for us to use a lot that way?
The zoning ordinance says that flag lots are permitted, but they're at the discretion of the planning director. And so we don't want to create whole subdivisions of just lot, flag lot, flag lot. But in some scenarios, we believe they're warranted. And in this instance, I think the planning director would support a flag lot. The pole, which is what comes to the road, it meets our minimum width requirements.
Yeah.
And so it would meet the minimum design criteria to create a flag lot.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And one thing that I want to add to what Ms. Green said is that they have two existing dwelling units on the property right now, in two separate structures. And the way that it was explained to me several months ago by Mr. Foster of the Journey Home is that the one in the back is dilapidated and needs to be torn down. And so we discussed options for how they could maintain the same number of dwelling units on the property, because having two dwelling units on that property is non-conforming right now. It's lawfully established non-conforming uses. And so we began to brainstorm, because if they tore that down, they would no longer be grandfathered in to have two dwelling units on the property. Well, we began to look at options, and one of those was to rezone the property so that they could subdivide it into two single-family lots so that they could maintain the same number of dwelling units that are on the property right now, whether they kept those existing units or tore them down and built brand-new single-family homes on them.
Yeah, the only reason I asked the question was it looks like it's wide enough for two long lots where they both have frontage, but
I think based upon the width of the property, you need 30 feet for the flagpole portion and at least 60 or 55. I think it's 55 for the non-flag lot. So for each flag lot, you would need an additional 30 feet. I don't believe that they have enough frontage to be able to get a third lot there,
No, I
especially
agree.
with the constraints of the
just-
existing home.
just two lots. I was
Just
looking at
talking about
the frontage and
Oh,
just having
two?
Any
two
lot.
normal lots.
I think the limiting factor is the existing house. You can see the footprint of the existing house. I think their goal is to leave the existing house up front. And
That's
so,
what I didn't understand. Okay,
yeah, with
I
the
got it.
location of the existing house.
I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I had a question too. Is the applicant here? I called you today. I did have a question, just
Sure.
interested in talking about the services that Journey Home provides, who will be the clientele that you're looking for here, and as we expand it, more question for staff. I called somebody today just to ask about, have there been any challenges on the site related to neighborly complaints about anything related to the site? So if you'll just
No, not since we've been there.
And if
We
you
have
don't
had-
mind, just go ahead and start out by introducing yourself for everybody that's watching tonight.
Sure, I'm Scott Foster. I'm the director of the Journey Home.
Thank you.
We operate a center at 308 West Castle Street here in the town, and also have 25 homes and apartments that we rent to low-income families and individuals throughout the city. And we acquired this property in 2014, and we've had three families, or the family that's currently in the front house is our third family that we've had there in those 6-something years. And we essentially, in the properties that we own and lease, we provide affordable housing to low-income families in town. So the folks that we rent to typically are at or below 50% of the area median income. And then we use the HUD home program rent limits, low rent limits, in order to provide a much more reasonable rent to folks in the neighborhood. So in this particular case, it'll be families with children. Anything that's bigger than one bedroom typically is families with children for us. But there are no other criteria.
thank you, sir.
Okay, sure.
And I do want to publicly thank
Sure.
you for your service.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding this application?
There are none. I'll make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. Item B is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 1 acre located along Clays Mill Drive and Sulphur Springs Road. Allison Magna and Elizabeth Hellender are the applicants. Again, Ms. Green.
Thank you again. This next public hearing is for you to consider a petition for annexation that's been filed with our office. The petition, we actually have several petitions because the property transferred ownership, and we were unsure to get the previous owners and current owners to sign that petition because, as you know, our annexation laws do require that to be at the request of the property owners. And so this request came to us because one of these two property owners had a desire to send their child to a city school, a city elementary school, and purchased the home under the advertisement that it was in an area that would allow that. After she closed on the home, the home builder approached city staff and admitted their mistake and asked if there was a way to annex the property. And so we studied the area. I have presented in your packet a plan of services and a feasibility study. What that does is provide a time frame for when the city can provide services and identifies the services the city can provide. Essentially, we're already providing many services to this area. It's already receiving sewer and paying an outside the city sewer rate. If annexed, then the rate would go down to just the same that we pay for those of us who live in the city and have sewer currently. It currently receives water from CUD and will continue to do so. These two lots are a part of a larger subdivision, most of which is located in the city. These 4 or 5 parcels were left out when the subdivision was created so that we would not create an island of unincorporated area of Rutherford County. It was a way to kind of have this development mostly be in the city, but what we thought was to comply with the intent of any of our interpretations of the law. Since then, we've had some changes in circumstances and I think opinions and legal opinions, and believe that we can annex these properties and we would be within our ability to that. And so after conferring with our legal staff, they're comfortable with this annexation if that's something the Planning Commission would like to recommend. The properties are contiguous with current city limits. They are located in the urban growth boundary. The Rutherford County Road Board has considered the 150 feet of Clays Mill Drive that we're requesting to annex as well. All of Clays Mill Drive, except for this 150-foot portion, is already in the city limits, and so it made sense that one entity would be responsible for the continued maintenance and operation of that road. You may recall that Sulphur Springs Road is on our major transportation plan and will be improved in the future. When the developer created these lots, the developer did participate in those improvements by providing fees in lieu of construction to our office, so we do have funds from the developer for future improvements to that road when it does happen, but I thought you might want to be aware of that. So this would be a relatively easy annexation for us to enact. I think when we studied this, we thought that just annexing property so they can go to city schools may not be reason enough, but after studying the property and seeing that it really probably would benefit our service providers and it would make sense, I think our recommendation as staff is that you do consider this annexation, approving this annexation, since they are receiving city services and drive city roads and are part of a city subdivision, and so it made sense to us to bring this to you. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you. When the meeting started, I did not see the owners in the audience. Do you see them, Matthew? But if you have questions about the plan of services that are prepared, of course, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Okay, we'll open the public hearing and ask if we have anybody that would like to come forward and speak for or against this annexation plan of services and annexation petition. Okay. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Ask for any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission.
There are none. I'll move for approval subject to all staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Our next public hearing will be an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 2.12 acres located along Veterans Parkway, north of Franklin Road. Overall Creek Partners and Safum Ragtip is the applicant. Sorry.
Good evening.
Ms. Rush, help
Thank
me
you.
out, please. Thank you.
I'll do my best. As indicated, the subject property is located on the west side of Veterans Parkway, just north of Franklin Road. It does include 2 parcels, each approximately 1 acre in size, for a total annexation area of 2.12 acres. The property owners have filed petitions with the city requesting annexation. They also have submitted a simultaneous application to rezone the property to commercial highway. This may be a little bit familiar. This was one of the 2 parcels had come before the Planning Commission in 2019, almost a year to the date, requesting annexation and rezoning. And after deliberation and public hearing, there was some comments provided back to the applicant to consider acquiring an additional parcel to make it a more buildable lot, which he has since done that. So the property, he does not own it yet, but it is under contract purchase at this time. The study area is within the urban growth boundary, and it is contiguous to the city limits on the south and to the east. We do have some concerns about these being currently developed with single-family residences that are occupied. Our assistant city attorney has been in communication with the applicant about how to resolve some of this. We would like to see the parcels combined and those houses demolished before the zoning would take place. They are discussing possibly providing conditions on the annexation with an agreement that would require that to take place. So Mr. Ives can describe that a little bit more in detail. For tonight, the purposes are to open up the public hearing and deliberate, and then make a recommendation to the City Council. I'm here for any questions, as well as the applicant is here this evening. Yes. And the applicant's representative, Mr. Clyde Roundtree. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. Any questions for Ms. Rush before we open the public hearing? Okay. We will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak either for or against this application. Okay. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. And we are ready for comments, questions from the Planning Commission regarding this application.
So before we vote on this, are we to stipulate what Ms. Rush was talking about with respects to the annexation, or is that going to be a zoning piece?
Mr. Halliburton, I would like to speak to that for a moment. We have discussed this. I've discussed this with staff and also with counsel for the applicants. And what we're suggesting is that Planning Commission and later council condition the approval of the annexation on the houses being demolished or removed, rather. At least one of them, I think they may be able to sell and have it removed from the property as opposed to demolished, and perhaps both of them, but at least one of them, I know they're looking at that, prior to the effective date of the annexation. Now, as a practical matter, under our current process, when there's a request for annexation, if that is approved, it becomes effective at the approval of the zoning. So they're tied together from an approval standpoint, but rather than conditioning the zoning on removal of these properties, removal of the houses from the properties, we're suggesting that we condition the annexation on it, which is, there's no arguable legal prohibition against the conditional annexation. And the applicant, as I understand, is agreeable to that. They're agreeable to having the houses removed from the property within a reasonable time. I'm not sure, 45, 60, 90 days after approval. They don't want to risk, and I think they understand that it's pretty rare when an approval is given on first reading that it then doesn't pass second reading. But that is a possibility, and if down the road the annexation and zoning are not approved, then they would like to not have had the structures removed. And that doesn't seem to be unreasonable. We have worked with people, similar kinds of situations in the past, usually tying it to zoning, but it seems appropriate to make this a condition of the annexation, that they agree to remove the dwelling units within a period of time to be finalized by the city attorney, after the effective date of the annexation. Does that make sense?
And
Kind of. So I guess the triggering mechanism would be that it would not go to second reading at council unless these houses are removed.
No, not necessarily. There would be an agreement in place for the houses to be removed within a certain period of time, and that agreement would be supported by either a cash or a letter of credit surety that the houses would be removed within a certain period of time after second reading. That would be a written agreement that would be in place prior to second reading.
And that agreement would say that if they're not removed, then the annexation is not in place?
Or that the city has the authority under the agreement to cash in the surety and effect the removal of the dwellings.
Oh, I see.
And would assure that that gets done
Okay.
and not leave us in the, I don't think this applicant is planning this, but
Right.
what we're trying to do is foreclose the possibility that these houses would get converted into small offices and be grandfathered in, because under commercial highway zoning in and of itself, they would have the right to convert these houses to offices, assuming that they can meet parking standards and things of that nature, which we expect that they would be able to. So to avoid that possibility, we're wanting to assure that the dwelling units are removed from the property reasonably promptly after the approval of the annexation and zoning.
And that would, Mr. Ives, that would also include the combination of the two parcels by a subdivision plat.
Yes.
And that would eliminate
We would include that.
the issues that we had in 2019 with these being long and narrow lots not being very conducive on their own for commercial redevelopment.
Yes. We can certainly, the Planning Commission can make that recommendation, and assuming council, of course, approves it, that can be a condition of the zoning, that the lots be combined.
The condition of the annexation.
I'm sorry, a condition of the annexation, my apology.
And so the parcel that's on the corner there that is also also zoned CH, I can't tell from that little aerial view. Is it actually a commercial use on there right now? And
It's,
corner of Franklin and
Rush,
Veterans?
would you like,
Thank you again. That corner parcel has an approved site plan, so that site plan approval is still valid, but they have not started construction. It's for Veterans Plaza, which included a gas station and a retail strip.
And so have the existing buildings on that lot been removed?
Those buildings have been removed, yes. And I believe there was also a lot combination.
yes, they've been
required for that.
combined into one lot. And one thing that I would add that was brought up during the 2019 public hearing was regard to cross connectivity between the area shaded in blue and the Veterans Plaza corner. And since that time, the Veterans Plaza developers came back in, submitted revised plans and a revised plat, and now, as a part of their approval, we do have the cross connectivity between the lots, so that there would be, when it's all said and done, people would be able to get from this development to Veterans Plaza without having to get back out on the Veterans Parkway.
Correct.
And I guess one question, presumably now we will only have one curb cut between those two parcels, which once they're united, can we talk about that?
I would have to defer to the applicant and his representative. We don't have a site plan proposed for this. I think they've put together some concept drawings that they may be able to address that question. Turn that over to Clyde.
Mr. Roundtree, good evening.
Yes, I'm behind this mask. Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. Thanks so much for hearing our request for annexation and rezoning. Mr. Martin, to answer your question, we know we're going to have cross connectivity. Exactly where the driveway is going to show up, it hasn't quite been determined yet, but there's more than likely it won't split these two lots. What we're running into is one more lot over, which is currently for sale. There's a stoplight right there. And so how that all lays out ultimately, I have a feeling there'll be cross connectivity against all three lots going to the traffic signal. So we'll, more likely between the three lots will be one driveway, whether that splits our property or shares with an adjacent property, that'd be the question mark. So it hadn't been determined yet. But the goal is to limit the amount of driveways on veterans, obviously. That's where we're shooting for. And also, several concepts that I've worked on have a lot to do with the back portion of the property, too. There's a large acreage behind this piece of property, so we're planning on having some sort of rear connectivity as well that'll go onto Franklin Road.
Mr. Martin, they would be limited based upon their amount of road frontage to how many driveways they could have. Our subdivision regulation specifies based on the amount of lot frontage. I don't know exactly how wide these are combined, but Mr. Huddleston and I speculate that they'd be limited to one driveway on those two blue parcels total.
Yeah, just comment. I know there was a lot of concern. We had a lot of discussion about this a year ago related to those curb cuts, and I'm appreciative of the applicant, making reasonable accommodations to try to make that work. So I'm glad that, if I understand you correctly, the applicant feels good about what we're asking related to the conditional annexation. Are we okay with that?
Yeah, if I could bring a little clarity, because this is the first time I ever have a situation. I don't want to get into David's territory, but our client does have a lawyer involved as well. What we've come to realize is that what he's realizing is that in order for him to secure a particular use for this particular piece of property, he has to be annexed into the city and zoned properly, and that's for a liquor license for some sort of liquor store operation. And so those licenses are contingent on those two conditions. And so what he's running into is with those houses being there and basically working order, taking them down, liquor licenses are only basically issued on a population basis, I believe. Once, they basically have benchmarks and they'll allow more license or one becomes available. So he's kind of in a tentative position going, do I tear these houses down and there's potential I won't get my liquor license? So that's what he's trying to keep himself positioned where the houses are not, where the land still has some value with those houses on it versus just knocking them down and sitting around for a year and a half kind of empty. So that's what I think what we're talking about, David, is there's a period of time after he receives his proper zoning annexation, he can apply for the license immediately upon that. But that window of opportunity of how long it has to stay in that state, right now the houses aren't occupied and he owns both pieces of property. Is that correct? Yeah, they're not occupied. You have no intention of even renting the houses. It's really a matter just, if it doesn't work out with a liquor license, he doesn't want, he just took down two nice houses without any really interest in developing the property towards his future goal. So it's a different, I haven't been in this one yet, but it's different for us, and I'm glad David's involved.
Yeah, and I am working with the applicant's attorney, and I believe we will be able to come to an agreement that will be satisfactory in terms of the length of time. We haven't established that exactly yet. But I believe we will. And of course, if that blows up and we can't, then when this gets to council, assuming that y'all recommend and it goes forward, we'll be putting that into place. And if it blows up and doesn't happen, council may take that into consideration when they're looking at this.
I'll just comment. I appreciate the effort because I know we're trying to protect the spirit of making sure that we don't have single-family residential turned into businesses in some of these corridors. And so thanks for the effort to be flexible, and appreciate the applicant's patience as we try to kind of toe the line on making sure we protect those standards. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
So again, I would ask that if they're assuming a motion to approve and to recommend this to council, that recommendation be conditioned on the structures being removed within a period of time after effective date of the annexation, with the precise time limits and agreement to be established by the city attorney's office and counsel for the applicant, and that agreement be in place prior to second reading would be the recommendation I would ask for.
And for the
So
two
moved.
Everybody
parcels,
got that?
for the two parcels to be combined into
I'm
one.
sorry, yes, and that the parcels be replatted to one.
So moved.
What he said.
What he said, that's exactly right.
You got that, Carolyn?
So we have a motion,
Second.
and did we have a second? Second. All in favor, please state aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you all very much. And then we have the companion application, which is a zoning application for approximately 2.12 acres located along Veterans Parkway, north of Franklin Road, to be zoned commercial highway simultaneous with annexation. Overall Creek Partners is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the companion zoning application that accompanies the annexation item that we just discussed and acted on. The addresses are 4431 and 4441 Veterans Parkway, just for the record, located along Franklin, located on Veterans Parkway, north of Franklin Road. As indicated, these are both currently developed with single-family residences and are no longer occupied. So I need to correct that for the record. And as indicated before, they do wish to ultimately combine the lots and develop it with commercial, as he had indicated, for a liquor store. They've also mentioned a drive-through restaurant at one point to be added to the liquor store. The adjacent zoning is commercial services, which is in the unincorporated portion for one of the parcels. The other parcel to the north, the subject property is currently zoned RM, which is a medium-density, single-family residential. Properties to the south are CH within the city limits, commercial highway. Property to the east is also in the city limits and is currently zoned commercial with the grocery store there on the corner. Property to the north is still in the unincorporated portion of Rutherford County and also have single-family homes occupied on those and are zoned RM. Future land use map for this property, subject property in the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan does identify general commercial as the appropriate land use. Future zoning of CH is consistent with that land use designation, so there are no inconsistencies with that. Again, the action that we are requesting is that you open a public hearing and then make a recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rush. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll open this public hearing and ask if there's anybody that would like to come forward to speak. And seeing none, we will close the public hearing and ask for any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission and/or a motion.
Does this motion need to include the same stipulation or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we approve subject to staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all. Next, we have a zoning application to amend the PRD zoning, Laurelstone PRD, on approximately 46.5 acres located along Lascassas Pike and DeJarnett Lane. Goodall Homes LLC is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Our next public hearing, as you mentioned, is to amend an existing PRD, Planned Residential District Zone. This PRD was created in 2017 and is named or referred to as the Laurelwood PRD and consists entirely of residential development. You can see the area shaded in red on the map before you. It's a rather large parcel at 46.5 acres. It has frontage along and access to Cushing Way, Lascassas Pike. And then you can see a couple stub streets, or at least one stub street into the property, Oakview Drive. When this property was considered in 2017, at that time it was decided by the Planning Commission City Council not to extend that connection to the south. And I just wanted to bring that up for posterity's sake, and then also to mention that we're also in this version of the plan not connecting into the property as discussed, and I think as the Planning Commission decided at that time. The property is mostly surrounded by unincorporated area of the Rutherford County. To the south is a church and some large lot subdivisions. Las Casas Pike, of course, has some ex-urban sized lots, so rather large lots. The 2017 plan included townhomes and zero lot line type development only in the plan. It is 199 dwelling units with those two housing styles that they called cottages and villas. There were 149 cottage units, which are basically townhomes, and they're in pods of 3 or buildings of 3 units. And then the remaining 50 were the villa units, which are those zero lot line homes that we talked about. They're requesting for the standards that apply to those to not change, that they remain the same. However, after they began developing this property, the applicant, Goodall Homes, decided that there was a need for a different type product, so they're wanting to introduce a third ownership style in this development, and they're proposing to introduce a small lot subdivision or single family detached. So the current plan that was approved in 2017 has 199 dwelling units for a density of 4.28 dwelling units per acre. This amended plan will ultimately reduce that number by just a few, so from 199 units to 186 dwelling units for a density that's just at 4 dwelling units per acre. So what they're asking, as I mentioned, is to add or introduce a new housing style by adding 31 single-family detached lots, and those are on small lots, most of them along Las Casas Pike, which makes sense because I think along Las Casas Pike you have a lot of large lot homes, and it makes sense to put your less dense housing style in that area. The single-family lots are proposed to be a minimum of 6,500 square feet with reduced setbacks on the side. The front setback will still be similar to what you would see in an R6 district and would allow the 4 parking spaces in the driveway, whereas the other 2 types of homes in this development park 2 cars in the driveway. The minimum square foot of each home is 1,500 square feet, so it's a little larger than the other 2 products, and they do have 2 car garages and those 4 off-street parking spaces. In your materials, I included the program book, which outlines the changes. It shows what is currently approved and what they're asking to change. To add those 31 single-family detached lots, essentially they're reducing the villas by 4, and they're reducing the cottages by 40, and those are primarily the ones running along Las Casas Pike. They've also rearranged their parking and their formal open space. I did ask for them to clearly delineate on the plan what's actually stormwater management and what is an active open space, and they've done that in this version of the plan where it wasn't so clear before. I think a large point of discussion when this was originally considered is the fact that they were building a bridge in the middle of the development, which will make that east to west connection that the city values, and I think the residents will value, and that still is a part of the plan, and also wanted to bring that to you just so that you were aware. The Murfreesboro 2035 future land use map recommends that this area develop with suburban residential characteristic, and that would be the most appropriate use here because it's on the city's periphery, it has a lower density, and it will help transition from the rural to the urban type development. The proposal doesn't comply with the future land use map. However, it's more in compliance than the current plan is now, so adding larger lots is closer to that future land use map than what was there before. Mr. Rob Mulchin is here, and he's representing the applicant. He's got a PowerPoint presentation that he would like to present to you to go through some of the details. He's going to make that presentation pretty quick because we know we have a lot on the agenda tonight. If you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them after Mr. Mulchin's presentation or after the public hearing, but you should conduct a public hearing prior to formulating your recommendation to City Council.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Green. Good evening, Mr. Mulchin.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. Good evening, Ms. Jones, members of Planning Commission, Rob Mulchin, SEC. Here tonight, on behalf of Goodall Homes, Mr. Maverick Green and William Gale are here in representation for Goodall Homes. And I'll get this thing started here. All right. We're here tonight requesting an amendment to the PRD, as Margaret Ann talked about, in regards to Laurelstone. You can see the original plan. As you can see here, we had 2 housing styles in there, the townhomes and the villas. The villas are the zero lot line front entry garage. The cottages, as we call them, were the townhome style with rear access garages off of private alleyways on that side. Originally had 199 units for 4.28 units per acre. The plan that we're bringing forth tonight has a change to that. We're bringing down 13 units overall on our density, so our density comes down to 4 units to the acre. You can see the plan on the eastern side of Bushman Creek is pretty much the same, except for the inclusion of the single-family lots that you can see. So when we're talking about the 3 dwelling styles, again, the cottages, as you can see, are relatively in the same place as the original plan in the core. You had the villas along the external portions and the northern boundaries of the property. And then now we've got the inclusion of the new single-family detached cottages or homes on that side that replace the townhome units that we had that faced out onto Old Pitts Lane and Las Casas on that side. So you can see kind of that's where we're looking for the major change on that. Cottages, as we talked about, and these are very tight front setbacks on that. In regards to that, we have a very deep backyard. In regards to the driveways, we have 2 cars in the driveway and 2 cars in the garage to meet our 4-car minimums on that side. Again, we're down to 109 of these age-targeted but not age-restricted homes. The minimum is 1,200 square foot. So this is all similar to what we had approved 3.5 years ago on that side. So this is more or less the carryover. And these are what the rear alley garages look like. The villas, again, a secondary component that was part of the originally approved plan on this. These are front entry garages. So you have room for 2 cars in front of the garage and then 2-car garages for each unit on that side for meeting our 4-car minimums on the housing side. And these, if you remember these units here, these are the elevations on that side. These are age targeted again, but not age restricted. Our square footages go up to 1,400 square foot for minimum living area on that side. And like I said, these are all front entry garage. Going back to where we're talking about the new product line in here, the single-family detached homes, you can see these have a 40-foot front setback to Old Pitts Lane and Las Casas. This is a carryover from the original PUD on that side. So the new product line in regards to the homes matches the same setbacks we had in regards to the townhomes that were on those properties originally. So more or less all we're doing is just displacing townhome units or multifamily type units with single-family detached homes along here, which, as Margaret Ann talked about, will probably present it a lot better in regards to the residential style of homes on those larger lots that are out in this area out there on that side. So something different to add to the product mix. You can see some of the elevations in regards to the character of these little homes and these lots in there. And some of the other architectural characteristics in regards to the water tables and such with regards to that, with the masonry board on that side. And the side elevations as well. Phasing, as you can see.
So Rob, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What's the front of the houses that are going to be on Las Casas? Which way are they facing? Does that make any sense?
The fronts of the homes actually face the road, so these are actually rear-loaded, loaded type products on that side. So there are no garages facing out to the main roadways in this. This is all rear alley on that side. You can see here really quick on a phasing plan, you can see phase 1A and 1B are actually under construction currently in regards to mass grading exercises on that side. Phases 2, which is the blue portion, and which is the small piece in the southern portion of the eastern side and all the western side of the development, those will not be enacted until we complete the bridge to cross Bushman Creek on that side to get us the east-west connectivity between Cushing Avenue and back to Las Casas to help alleviate some traffic on DeJarnette on that area out there. Amenities, we've got the main amenity, and this is still the same program as we had with the original plan. The amenity with the clubhouse is the same focal feature. Aside with that, we've got community gardens. We've got a pet park as well on that side. And staying with our commitment that we had originally on that side, we were going to install a 6-foot wide pedestrian walkway along the fronts of these lots. Since we don't have sidewalks on Las Casas and Old Pitts, we wanted to incorporate a sidewalk component to the fronts of these homes with our large setbacks to allow for our residents and community members out there for a walking space that's safe and convenient, but also create a walking loop or running loop within the development itself on that side, utilizing that frontage along those 2 roadways. Access, The main access point we have is off of Las Casas. We actually have approved plans that are through TDOT for our turn lanes that we were committed to during the original approval on that side. So we have those plans that are approved for us to install a dedicated left-hand turn lane as you're leaving town to turn into development, and also a dedicated right-hand turn lane to turn into development as you're heading into town on Las Casas on that side. Of course, our secondary access point will be off of Cushing Avenue over there once we get the bridge installed. And then we got 2 future stub locations that are, pretty much in the same location as the original plan that we had 3.5 years ago on the north, and then one to the south to allow for access to adjacent properties if those properties ever did develop on that side. Then we've also continued to our commitment in regards to leaving right-of-way dedication for a future possible connection if and when the city ever needed to make that connection back to Old Pitts Lane, if that was ever to be developed in some form or fashion down there on that side. So you can see that's still part of our commitments today. Access in regards to our roadways, you can see the purple is our 50-foot right-of-way, public right-of-way, our main thoroughfare through the development to get you from Cushing Avenue back out to Las Casas. The yellow is your 40-foot, more or less your local roadways in regards to those streets on that side, and the red are all your alleyways for all the alley garages that we'll have in the development on that side. I appreciate your time and consideration. If you have any questions for me now, I'm here. If not, if you have any questions after the public hearing.
So can you remind me, and I don't remember, so our main access road off of Las Casas, that will be the initial only way in and out of this subdivision until phase 2 is done. How many homes will we have in that first area? So I guess do we have a light at that intersection, or does that justify a light? I don't know.
No, as of right now, in regards to the discussions we had at TDOT with getting our plans approved, there's no light plan for that intersection. I don't think it warrants it in regards to the amount of traffic that's on Las Casas and what's coming out at that light. Now, I don't know the specifics of what the engineering department has worked with in regards to TDOT, in regards to, because that is a state roadway, in regards to getting that a light at that intersection. But as far as I know right now, it's not warranted for a traffic light.
Okay.
And then in regards to the amount of homes that you're talking about coming out that until we get the bridge built, that phase 1 that the city requested us to have that cap on there, I think it's about 50% of the overall density is in that phase 1 that would come out that entrance until the bridge was made for the connection to get back to Cushing on that side. It's the same commitment we had 3.5 years ago. We're just still honoring that again.
Yeah, I just need a little refresher on my 3.5 years ago memory. So of that full phase 1, then, when it gets up to 50%, that's when you're saying you will have worked on or be working on the bridge and expect that to be in place before you're up to 60 or 75% of phase 1.
Yeah, no, the phase 2, we cannot do anything in phase 2 until
Right.
that bridge is in place. So we can work through getting all the lots completed in phase 1, but we cannot work on anything in phase 2 until that bridge is in place. So we would start working on that bridge well in advance of when we start getting close to maybe running out of lots in phase 1 before that bridge is set in motion.
Okay, and so how many total units then in phase 1?
Phase 1, and I don't have a number off the top of my head, but it's about 50% of.
About 120,
Okay.
roughly.
All right. What other questions y'all have?
Does the city anticipate having to put a crossing guard at Cushing, or, you know what I mean? Because it's going right into the road where the middle school is, or is there probably not enough traffic coming?
Our school's response to that is generally they leave it up to the principal of the school to see if
Okay.
there's a need, and so it's not something that I've reached out to the principal to inquire. Certainly, I think that if it backs up, the first wave is the neighbors would, of course, complain to the principal, and then they would do that. But the schools generally leave it up to each school.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious too, I don't think I was here when we looked at this last time, but more of a learning opportunity for me, not connecting to Oakview. What's the basis for that?
So you're probably asking because you see me and my colleagues standing on the side asking you to make those connections every month. And so it is something that we value and we think it's important. I also wasn't here for that discussion, but Mr. Blomley was, and I'm going to look at him and see if he recalls. I was on.
I've already admitted that I don't remember anything about it.
Margaret Ann, since you took the school crossing guard question, I'll take this one. No, yeah, I did work on this back in 17 when it originally came through. We had a neighborhood meeting. I think most of the concerns at the neighborhood meeting centered around the connection to Oakview. I think most of the people who were in attendance were residents of Oakview Drive. I think it's that, and I don't recall exactly what went into making the decision not to connect, but I will say that what is not our standard practice. Our standard practice is if there is a stub street, we want to see that connection, and almost every other time you'll see us say, please let's have the connection. So I don't recollect exactly why the decision was made not to make this connection, other than there was opposition to it. But it is not our standard practice to not make that connection.
And I don't recall the exact conversation, but my guess is it was a compromise based upon their agreement to go ahead and build the bridge and get all the way to Cushing at a certain capacity point. And then that way there would in fact be two ways in and out of this subdivision and not necessarily having to affect the folks in that subdivision. So that would be my guess.
And I'll echo those because I was one that held the neighborhood meeting. That was pretty much the main driving force was the residents did not want their way of life disrupted in regards to that development over there. So we had the opportunity to provide that stub that's on the northern side to get to the west to the adjacent property that's on the north side of Bushman Creek that doesn't have any development on it today. We were able to make that portion there, so it does provide for another alternative if that land ever would develop to get another avenue back over to Cushing on that side and provide another access way through there without getting up and disrupting what the neighbors came out in support of not having a connection made through there.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, if we had a do-over, we might look at it differently. I don't know. But as far as the changes they're proposing with this, I think they're not substantial enough to have warranted staff to bring that up as a desire on our part to see them make that connection.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions? Because we need to open the public hearing. So we will open the public hearing and ask if there's anybody that would like to come forward to speak regarding this zoning application request. Okay. No one? We'll close the public hearing. And what other questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
There are none. I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, our next item is a zoning application for approximately 78 acres located along Medical Center Parkway, Robert Rose Drive, Wilkinson Pike, and Willow Oak Trail to be rezoned from MU, GDO1, and GDO2 to PUD, CH, GDO1, and GDO2, Clary Park. Hines Acquisitions LLC is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you. I think this is the last time you'll see me tonight. I don't know if that makes you happy or not, but thought I'd give you a heads up.
Always happy to see you, Ms. Green.
And And I'm also stalling, so I can fast forward.
Yeah, I was fixing to say,
Find your spot.
I think she's just killing time.
Okay, so I've got our map pulled up. So this next plan, or this next zoning change application is for you to consider some rezoning along Medical Center Parkway, Wilkinson Pike, Willow Oak Trail, Gresham Park Drive, and Robert Rose Drive. A lot of streets. If you reference the map, it's the areas that are colored in the red and blue. And this is located along Medical Center Parkway, directly across from the avenues, which I think we're familiar with. The large parcel in the top right is this battlefield, and so that's another significant point of reference. This application has come to you several times in the past, so I know that you are familiar with it. At the risk of repeating myself, I will go through some of the things that I've shared with you before, just to refresh ourselves, since there's been a lot of change, and then I'll explain to you what the changes are today. Initially, when this came to you, the application was to zone all the property to PUD, Plan Unit District. And at that time, you looked to see what the surrounding zonings were, and the avenues is zoned CH, Commercial Highway District. The contiguous properties to the east are Plan Unit District, which is apartments, and Mixed Use District, which are also apartments. That's to the east, and then to the west, it's property zone CH, and so that's the Chamber of Commerce and some commercial developments. To the north are some properties zoned RS15, that's Single Family Residential District. Those lots were annexed and zoned RS15 shortly after the Good Friday tornado hit our community, in part because the applicants wanted to be annexed and rezoned to allow their property to be zoned for commercial purposes. When it was considered by the Planning Commission and City Council, they didn't want to rezone those properties to commercial highway because they didn't want to create a development where houses would just be converted into commercial uses and not be designed to meet those standards that we have in our Gateway Design Overlay District. So they're zoned RS15. A lot of those are vacant, but some of them do have structures on them. And from time to time, I receive calls from folks who want to get redeveloping those properties, but there's nothing that has ever matured to this point. And just north of that is the rest of that single-family residential subdivision. I referenced Stones River Battlefield, which you can also see on this map. All of these properties are located in our Gateway Design Overlay District, which we're also familiar with. We I think officially adopted at the end of 2004 and then started learning and implementing it in 2005. So the zoning request for this property would not change the fact that these properties are in the Gateway Design Overlay District. They still would be subject to those standards, except for any that they've asked for special exceptions. And because I get asked about the number of dwelling units in this gateway, I did go ahead and include an exhibit that shows you the apartments in this area. In the Gateway Design Overlay District, there's just over 2,800 apartments. More than half of those are on the east side of the interstate, and so that's about 56%, or 1,578. And so there's a map that GIS has done for us, and so we can easily track those apartments. And I just wanted to utilize that and provide you that information in case you're going to ask. And then now I'll just give you a little background with the property. In 2013, the city of Murfreesboro created the mixed-use district. It did not exist before that time. We envisioned a zoning district that would allow by right the type of mixed-use districts or mixed-use developments we see elsewhere in Tennessee or in other states. I think as staff and as Planning Commission City Council see the value in mixed-use developments and how they can create communities that don't always rely on cars. We know that in this area people will be traveling for employment, but wanting to create neighborhoods that people could live in and enjoy and walk to areas and kind of apply some of the new urbanism or traditional neighborhood design to those developments. We haven't seen a lot of what we call vertical mixed use. We've seen more horizontal mixed use, and so some of the properties develop with this lot is self-storage, that lot is restaurant, this lot is a strip center, this lot is apartments, and then a hotel. And so because we wanted to ensure that apartments didn't start cannibalizing this valuable zoning district, because the mixed-use district only exists in the gateway, and that was by design because we know that we can have a higher standard of development, we have higher expectations. The city's invested a lot of money in this area, and we are very protective of the area, so that's why the mixed-use district only exists in this overlay district, because we know that there are additional protections and parameters that apply to the properties. So we did create, so in the mixed-use district, apartments are allowed by right, and they're allowed with a density of 25 dwelling units per acre. I mentioned that we were concerned with the amount of apartments that were coming up in the gateway. I think it was attractive because the density is the highest density allowed anywhere in the city of Murfreesboro, and also because it is so close to so many amenities, restaurants and shopping and those things that a lot of people like to live near. But at that time, or a few years ago, we adopted a footnote to the mixed-use district, which limits the amount of land that can be consumed by residential uses, because we did want to make sure we had that blend. And it says that in developments consisting of 10 or more acres in a mixed-use district, the use dwellings multifamily shall constitute no more than 25% of the developable land. And in developments of less than 10 acres, it can't be more than 50% of the developable land. So what that did is require the owners of property to have a master plan and show their property and identify how much the maximum amount of that land area that can be consumed, with the only residential uses permitted in the gateway, which are apartments. Condominiums, of course, would be allowed as well. And so we have that restriction because of that concern, and so I thought it was valuable to have that background. And so when I was looking at, and we'll get into the details of Clary Park in just a moment, but when I was looking at it, it looks like Clary Park has about 41% of their land area for commercial purposes, 32% is townhomes or condominiums, and I grouped those into one, and 26% as apartments. And we'll talk about what they're doing with apartments. This property that we're looking at in 2017 was rezoned because it was previously zoned RS15, single-family residential district. And I think when it was zoned RS15, we expected at some point in the future there would be a zoning change come in, and so in 2017 the property owners asked for that. When they came in to ask for the RS15 property to be rezoned from RS15 to mixed use, they also asked to remove the Wilkinson Pike buffer that applies to this property. And so, let's see, a good way of communicating that area. I don't know if this hand works, but it's like a rectangle that runs south of Wilkinson Pike is the area that was in the buffer in which the property owner requested the buffer be removed. I don't think Planning Commission, City Council were comfortable completely removing that, because part of the purpose of that buffer was to prohibit development within 100 feet, restrict height in that area, and in part out of respect to the nearby battlefield. And so the Planning Commission, City Council weren't completely comfortable removing that, and the applicant voluntarily offered to place restrictive covenants on the property that would restrict the height of the buildings in that area, because with the buffer you couldn't even put parking in this area. But taking the buffer off, you could use it for parking. So essentially with the Wilkinson Pike buffer on there, you could use it for landscaping and maybe stormwater management, but not parking, no structures, and storage. And so they really wanted to get some of that land back for development purposes. And as a trade-off, they committed to constructing a buffer along that area, a landscape buffer, and we've referenced that in the past. And so I wanted to mention that that is part of the recorded restrictive covenants on the property. They committed to installing it in the next growing season, which should have been in 2017, and the Planning Commission did review and approve a site plan for the buffer, but it has not been constructed. The Clary Park plan is noting that buffer and recognizing that it is a requirement of the restrictive covenants, and their proposal is to build it in phases and construct it with the development that they're proposing. So that gives you a little background. The Clary Park PUD does apply to about 78 acres, a little less, it's 77.8 acres, and it consists of townhomes, multifamily condominiums, apartments, which are multifamily, and commercial outparcels. The project is divided into 7 distinct areas. So in total, the plan proposes 600 apartment units, 290 townhomes, and 24 acres, and just over 30 acres of commercial highway zoning. Some of the property is being dedicated or will be utilized as access ways, and they've identified that acreage as well. So this project came to you in June for you to consider scheduling a public hearing, and at that time you heard concerns from planning and legal staff that the book really didn't meet the standards for a planned development. It was not specific enough, and we weren't comfortable with you accepting the book as meeting those standards. And so we expressed that certainty, and we were concerned with the desire of the applicant to have it be market-driven. With the plan development, it really needs to be a specific plan. And then also, I think the Planning Commission expressed concerns with some of this could be commercial, or this could be apartments, or this could be this, or could be that. And I think the applicants heard you say that was something that you weren't comfortable with. So they came back in July with an amended plan development book, and were able to more narrowly define the residential portions. And so they got more specific with the apartments, with the townhomes, and I think they heard our concern that it was mostly residential development, it wasn't really mixed use. And so, in an effort to address our concerns with mixed use, they committed to requiring a minimum amount of square footage of commercial uses in the apartments. I think it's 4,000 square feet. I'm sure that they'll go through that. But on each of the 2 apartment communities, they did commit to about 4,000 or 5,000 square feet on the first floor of commercial. And so that was an effort to provide that mixed use development that we really wanted to see. We continued to work with them, and we're still uncomfortable with the plan that they were proposing for a lot of the commercial portion of the development. And they really did not know what they wanted to do here, so amended the request from rezoning the entire property to PUD to rezoning portions of the property to PUD, and that's the blue area on the map that you have. So from mixed use district to PUD, plan unit district, and then rezone other portions of the property from mixed use district to CH, commercial highway district. What you see across the street, the avenues, is zoned commercial highway district. As I mentioned, it would remain in the Gateway Design Overlay District. So by being a bulk zone of CH, the plan development doesn't need to be very specific about the development of those parcels. I think part of their concern was they could do a plan, but they knew that things would likely change and they'd need to come back for an amendment. So given the option, they changed their application to CH, Commercial Highway District. And you can see that it consists of several of those areas that are identified in the pattern book. And on August 19th, we brought it back to you and asked you to amend when you scheduled for a public hearing, to amend it to include the CH portion. So that's what is on the table tonight. So as far as the plan, even though there are 2 different zoning districts, it's really important to staff that it be managed, maintained, and there be an overall responsible entity that it is developed. It does maintain the standards. Across the street, the Avenues is not a planned development, but they have a very strong owners, or very strong covenants, and they have an architect on board that reviews all developments and all tenant build-outs, and they have a strong management regime. And so we've asked them to come up with a plan on how this can be, because we fully expect that portions of this will be sold off. It won't be all under the ownership of the applicant, who is Hines Development tonight. And so when you do sell property, I want to make sure that the intentions are communicated, those off-site improvements are included. And so some elements of the CH property are included in the plan development book, talking about the streetscapes along Medical Center Parkway and some roadway extensions. And so it does speak to the CH portion, and I expect probably before the City Council, if this gets to City Council, before they have their second reading, any of those needed restricted covenants can be adopted. I've seen something that's been provided to me from the applicant where they also want to restrict uses on the CH property. Of course, as far as planning, the zoning ordinance provides the uses that are permitted there. The Gateway has some additional uses that may be allowed, but are restricted in the Gateway, and I think they're interested in restricting it further. For example, gas stations near some of these apartments isn't really appropriate. Nobody wants to live near apartments or nobody wants to be right next to a gas station that's bright and it's loud and it may or may not have 24-hour service. And I think they've expressed that that's something they don't want to do as well. And so they're proposing to manage that with restrictive covenants. But as you know, that is a tool that is can be utilized, but it's not something that's enforced by planning staff. So most of the plan that we really have comments on is the plan development portion. The plan development portion is basically the residential portion of Clary Park. The apartments, or some apartments, would be permitted in the zoning, so that's something that would be permitted by right. And apartments with mixed use would be permitted, so having that first floor commercial Townhomes are not a use that's permitted in the Gateway Design Overlay District. So to have townhomes in this development, it has to be zoned something else, and so plan development's the approach. Many of the comments or concerns that I have about the development are specific to the residential portion because the other properties are CH. I mean, as a staff member, I'm comfortable reviewing commercial properties in the Gateway. It's something that I do pretty frequently. But then with the plan development, I'd like the plan to get in a place where we're pretty comfortable with it. Let's see here. I did want to mention that adopting the plan development would modify some approved master plans that we have for the area. And for several months, we've been speaking with applicants, members of planning staff, development services, or public infrastructure staff, and have had concerns with the street layout and the street network. Our master plan does show some road extensions that are not being made with this development. For example, where Henley Station, I guess I can write on here. There was a road that comes through here, and that's right in the middle of their apartments, and they are not interested in putting that road there. We also have master plans that show the extension of West Park Drive. And they do have that road, but it's private and it's gated, so it will serve as an additional access point to this development, but not for the surrounding properties. So those are two areas that we've really been discussing in depth with them and had a lot of concerns with them. I think that we've gotten to a point where the change in use from mixed use to residential helps justify a change in the street network and street layout. There are things, of course, that we want to see. There is still the connection to Wilkinson Pike, which is important because Wilkinson Pike is a road that's going to be rebuilt by the city in the future, and we don't want them to turn their back to it, but of course it's not rebuilt today. We think that there may be some justification to changing this road network based on the change of uses. Before it was neighborhood or regional commercial and it was drawing people in. It's not so much doing that anymore. What we still feel pretty strongly about and think it would help with those two street connections that are not being proposed is there's a private drive that runs along these commercial centers at the corner of Robert Rose Drive and Medical Center Parkway. Rose Corner is one of them. And they go into Redstone Bank. I think it's that really nice bank. And they stop there. If that Clary Park runs behind these lots, if that could be connected, we think that could really be an improvement and help with the traffic distribution that we're looking at. And so I think that could help justify the change in the network that we see, the change in the master plan, and the development mix. So those are some of the things as far as transportation that we've been talking about. I never know how to undo these. Matthew always helps me. I'll just leave them up there.
Bottom left-hand corner.
It says undo. There we go. Okay. So as far as the townhomes, I guess I can bring up some exhibits. I did include some communication from the applicants saying what has changed, because there have been so many, it's an iterative process, and there's been so many back and forth that I'd like to document what is being changed and have something to reference to, and so they have provided those, mentioning the things that have changed so far. So what I'm providing comments on are the version of plans that were provided to us to include in the packet tonight. I know that they've sent some emails today and last night wanting to make some further changes, and I think we can talk about that later, but really the comments relate to the plans that we have available to us and the ones that you have on your iPads. I did want to mention we were concerned about the timing of some of the road connections. We really wanted to see Willow Oak tie-in sooner than what was shown in the previous plans. And so they have a sheet in their program book, and I'm going to tell you what sheet it is. I'm going to find it. It's sheet 26, which gives specifics as to project timing. And to their point, they wanted to have some time to build the infrastructure and I think have some cash flow to complete the work. So I was asking for Willow Oak to be completed in an earlier phase. They've broken out some of the development so that it will be started earlier than they had previously proposed, but it probably won't be finished until later. So I do want you to pay attention to that sheet 26, which specifies the public improvements phasing, which is something we talked about, I think, in previous versions of the plan. So many. So there's a land use map that gives the acreage and the number of of dwelling units for each acreage and the anticipated build-out. As I mentioned, the townhomes were the portion that I had most concerns with. In the Gateway, of course, I know I don't have to say this to you, but it's an area that we're really proud of. It's a city that has continually invested in. It's something that we envisioned years ago and are proud of how it turns out. So when we review developments in this area, we expect more than you might see on the other side of the interstate or something on one of our major arterials in our community, but it needs to be different. It needs to be special. It needs to be more than just temporary housing for people, not temporary as in homeless, but just a place for people to live for a while until they can really live somewhere they want to. So when I've been reviewing this application, of course, there's a higher standard that apply to this than I might apply to some other areas because of the investment that we have in this area and our expectations in the area. And so there are some elements of this plan that I mentioned that they've changed, but were big concerns of staff. And one was that the plan created a lot of dead-end drives or roads. And this version shows some hammerheads where you could turn around, but they're not interconnected. And to your point, we're constantly asking the Planning Commission, even in the face of people who may not want it, to provide interconnectivity between developments and within developments. And so we were concerned with the fact that they were creating so many dead-end streets that are basically traps. We didn't want service providers to have to back out, and we didn't want people who live there to have to back out of these developments. And those hammerheads sometimes can be misused and abused. People will just park there or maybe park their boat there, and they're not seen, and it's hard to enforce. You can have all the intentions that you want of a owners association enforcing it, but 5 minutes later you can put something back where it's not supposed to be. They emailed a version of the plan to me today that shows eliminating those, and that would be something I would highly advocate for. This is not a network layout that I would support. This layout also I was concerned with because it has they did revise the previous plan to this one because they had a lot of the sides of the buildings facing the road, and that goes against our design guidelines and our standards for the Gateway. And so I asked for them to reorient these so the structures actually address the street and you're not turning your back to it. And so they proposed to do a few units with wraparound porches, which I think is a pretty effective treatment if you do wraparound porches and some additional landscaping, but really weren't proposing to do much else, and I didn't think that was enough. It wasn't good enough for our community, and it wasn't good enough for this place. And I got an email today saying that they wanted to do more wraparound porches, and so I think they'll probably want to speak to that. But I do have concerns when you are turning the side of a building and not addressing the street at all, and so I think that they're wanting to revise their plan to do that, but again, it's something I want to talk to you about. And so before they were proposing just to put some shutters on some of these units, which doesn't go far enough. It really needs to be something a little bit more. With these high dense areas, I've heard from Planning Commission that guest parking is important, and I didn't see very many spaces for that. So I thought it would be a good idea to provide some on-street parking along the road and parallel spaces. It helps with the streetscape, helps with the aesthetic, and also can provide some additional parking. It would be important to provide it near the pool and pool house, but also throughout the development, since there's not really room for, if I was going to visit somebody, to park anywhere. And so another concern was this lack of guest parking, which is something I think I've heard from Planning Commission several times. The version of plan they sent me today does show some additional guest parking. I think that probably they can work on distributing it a little bit better. That's another thing that I've heard from you guys, from the Planning Commission, is that you want it not all concentrated in one area, but within the development. So that's something I think that we would like to ask them to do. And then another thing that was important is how they are addressing the adjacent undeveloped property, the Hale property, H-A-L-E. I always feel when I say the Hale property, I say it with a southern accent, the Hale property. They're very close to the property line. They have headlights going right into that property, and I think that it would be a better plan to think about that interface to see what they can do to be good neighbors there. Surely it might develop in the future, but I have seen draft plans for that property a couple years ago, and I gave them the same comments. No headlights into the neighbor. It's a nice thing to do. Think about that interface and be respectful, and so that's something that I've asked for them to do as well, and this of course is in the staff comments. And then the last thing was these townhomes are alley loaded, which is important because you don't have these frontage garages that we don't want to see in the Gateway. But I really wanted them to emphasize the porches on these townhomes because the garages, the entry garages, there's no like patio space or a personal space that you have outdoor, and so really it's your front porch. And so I wanted those front porches to really be usable, to have a place that you can put chairs on, you can sit, and I visited Mr. Blomley back 15 years ago in his old home and sat on his porch, and we had to actually turn our chairs sideways to sit on the porch because of his long legs. And so I always, when I review developments, I think Matthew's got to be able to sit on this porch. And so one of the things that one of my criteria are, can Matthew sit in a chair on this porch? Can it be a comfortable space for him? There is no other outdoor space. It's this, and it does front on the mews, but those are common areas. And so what I ask is that those porches be well-sized, be significant. In the 90s especially, planners got a lot of flack for making garages the predominant feature on homes. Porches disappeared, and then if you drive through neighborhoods, and you can do it now, you can see people raise their garage doors, have chairs set up in the garage, and have that be as a place to sit, and that's a failure of planning because we didn't continue to make that space for people, and that's important. And so I think it's important in this development as well. So I think the emphasis has to be the front porches, and so part of my concern is making sure those not only are wide enough, but deep enough for Mr. Blomley's legs to sit on. And also,
I appreciate that.
You appreciate that? Yeah. I probably could fit there, but I don't know about him. And so, and I also think about these spaces for the different people who live there. You know, if you have young children, and the first time they walk on grass, I know when you think about that, there is no space in the back for your child to touch grass for the first time, it's the front, and so that space is important. Or if you're coming home from work and you want to drink some tea, you need a space to just relax. You don't always want to be inside. So I think it's really valuable to make sure that the design works, because that is everybody's outdoor space. One of the things that I've tried to emphasize is elevating those porches, because these are slab houses, and slab on grade porches have a certain aesthetic that isn't exactly like as high quality as we would expect in the gateway. So the past several weeks and months, it's something I've tried to emphasize to the developer, that I really want to see those elevated porches. I know it's not always easy with slab grade houses, but I know it's possible. And so that's another element of the plan that I've really wanted them to work on. Let's see what else. The future land use map recommends that this area develop as mixed use. It's reflective, I think, of the current zoning. And I think that the proposed development could be consistent with that UC character, which is the urban commercial character. It's described as the designation that allows a broad range of commercial, office, and high-density residential uses and public spaces, serving surrounding neighborhoods, commercial, professional, business parks, and visitors for nearby communities. And so I think that this property could meet that future land use map designation. We did hold a neighborhood meeting for this project, and it was a tricky thing to do considering our current environment. We want to make sure everybody feels safe. We held it at Fire Station 4 and in the place where they park the trucks, and had the doors open, and the weather was nice, and we did have people who attended, and so I was glad to see them there. So they did hold a neighborhood meeting on July 28th. I'm going to invite the design team to the lectern to go through some of the details of the plan, and they'll probably want to talk about how maybe they could address some of the concerns that we have. I also did include a list of the uses permitted in the CH district, if you want to reference that as well, and those uses that are prohibited in the Gateway Design Overlay District. I know that was a lot of information. If you have any questions for me at this time or later, I'll be glad to answer them. Otherwise, I'll invite the design team to the lectern.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Green.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. O'Shea. Welcome.
Good evening, Commission, Planning Commission. It's a pleasure to be back here again. My name is Walter O'Shea. I work with Hines. I'm the kind of lead development representative for us in our endeavor here at Clary Park. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come back and present this project to you for approval here at the public hearing. We've spent a lot of time working with staff over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks since we've been back, since we were last in front of the Planning Commission. I think we've made excellent progress on a number of fronts. It's been a really collaborative process working with staff, Anytime you have a project that's this size in this important of a location, there are going to be challenges and there's going to be opportunities. And so we've continued to work closely with staff to find solutions that work well for the community, work well for the city, and still create a project that we think we want to deliver the quality and the excellence that is the Heinz standard. I really would like to thank and recognize Ms. Green, Mr. McKnight, Mr. Huddleston, and Mr. Ives. They've really worked hard with us to come up with some creative solutions to some of the issues we were trying to overcome. We have with us today our Reagan Smith great team. We have Randy Caldwell here, our planner emeritus. Kevin Gunther, who's going to walk through some more details on the plan and some of the changes that we've made in a moment. Wes McGill, who's a drainage engineer, is going to discuss some of the drainage adjustments that we're going to make that really came out of some of the concerns that we heard from the town hall meeting we had with the residents. And it was really all the residents that lived across the street on the north side of Wilkinson Pike that attended. And then we also have Brandon Baxter, who's a transportation engineer, if you have any questions related to transportation. And finally, we also have with us David Lowry, who is a vice president with David Weekly Homes. They will be our builder partner in the townhome area. So David's here if we have any specific questions for them in terms of their plans for how they look to develop the townhome product. I thought before I'd turn over to Kevin, there's been a lot of back and forth with staff on this project. It's a big project. It can be a little confusing in terms of the amount of information. There are a couple things that I thought I would just clarify in terms of what is actually in the plan, and some of these things have changed from the initial submission to where we are today. One is, from the get-go, we have always wanted to honor the mixed-use requirement that there be no more than 25% apartments. And so from the get-go, we have planned this with less than 25%, and as it stands today, it is 24.9% of the area within the community. On page 13 is the chart that shows that. We have 19.4 acres of land that could be apartments, and out of the 77.8, that's 24.9. So we've told the city council and commission members that we met with early on we would meet that 25%, and we've honored that commitment. Just a couple other clarifications on the CH zoning and the restrictions that we've put in place. We had worked in detail with Margaret Ann in particular to really restrict the uses that we could put in the commercial areas within the project. We obviously wanted to restrict many of those for our own investment, and worked closely with staff to come up with a list that they were comfortable with and we were comfortable with. We have carried forward those restrictions both in terms of the plan development zoning book as well as the restrictive covenant that will be recorded. And in working with Mr. Ives, that restrictive covenant is enforceable by the city in addition to being enforceable by the private development entity and the homeowners association. So we've made sure that we've covered that issue going forward in perpetuity. That covenant will be in place, I think, for 50 years, and then it automatically renews for another 50 years. So we feel like we've got that well covered, working closely with Mr. Ives. There is one that I know we've talked in detail about the buffer on Wilkinson Pike, and initially we were planning on phasing that. The plan book does now show that will be done as part of our phase 1 construction. We will build the berm and the landscaping as part of our phase 1 work along our frontage on Wilkinson Pike, and that's on page 25 of the book. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin and let him kind of walk through some more details in the plan, and we'll be here to answer any questions you have. And again, thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kevin Gunther with Reagan Smith. Pleasure to be here. Madam Chairman, Planning Commissioners, City staff. We do have hard copies available for the pattern book. In the past, we know sometimes that's beneficial and makes things a little easier for you to reference, and those are available. But I did want to clear that with Madam Chairman, if that's something that you'd like us to distribute, we can do that. That's up to your preference.
You have them here
Yes, ma'am.
tonight?
Yes.
I will take one if that's acceptable. Are they what y'all have seen so far?
Are they with the updates, or are they exactly what's in the book?
It's what's in your book, and we've tabbed the pages with the references in our PowerPoint.
Okay.
Your preference.
And Mr. Gunther, I would just mention that it looks like your PowerPoint presentation has gotten X'd out at some point during the night. So it's the second one on the list on the File Explorer that's pulled up right now.
Okay. Right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, if you'd like, we can distribute these. Like I said, it's really at your preference. Okay, thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, as Mr. O'Shea had mentioned, this is an important project. We recognize that, and we appreciate all the ground. I think we feel like we've covered on this project. The neighborhood meeting was certainly a part of that. We felt like we got very good feedback at that meeting. The residents expressed that we heard very favorable references to the residential portion of the project that we were proposing. And then I have to mention too, I think one of the funnest things that I was able to do was to go to Firehouse 4 and check out their fire slide. So it has been that was an important part of the process. And I think one thing, as Mr. O'Shea had mentioned, is that we're very committed to making this work for the city and the surrounding community. And so we are here tonight really to emphasize what's changed since we've seen you last, but we can also go back and revisit any of the things that were previously discussed, and we're willing to take as much time as we need to make sure we're answering all your questions. So I'll refer to the first slide we have here is on page 12, which is the master plan. And as staff had suggested, the one real change that is different on this plan from what we had before is that what we had shown as previously part of the PUD, the PUD, for areas 1 and 3 and 4 is now commercial highway. That being said, we've worked very hard with staff to maintain all the same land use requirements, all the same opportunities as far as streetscape design. Nothing has changed in the pattern book relative to those parcels as far as what we had worked with staff at achieving. And that's something I also want to compliment Mr. Ives on, is that we worked very hard with him at saying how can we make sure we don't lose any ground on what we think is important for those commercial pieces. And really the reason that we made that change, and we appreciated staff's suggestion that we could go this route, was although we know that it's going to be like the rest of the gateway, we're not asking for any less standards, we're not asking for anything that would be a land use that would not be something compatible with the gateway. We just didn't know exactly what was going to happen in every single one of those parcels. So what we wanted to do is hold our ground on the standards and the land uses and how it all fits with a master plan, how all the connections work, how the interchanging relationships between land uses work, hold that all in place, but realizing we can't tell you exactly what the site plan looks like until we bring it to you. We created that CH district. So I did want to mention that was really the reason for our change. It wasn't trying to diminish any of what we felt like were very important discussions on the quality the connections and the way that those commercial parcels would function within the master plan. I also want to point out that the acreages of those areas, the relationships they have to each other, the overall percentages of those uses has not changed with this master plan. The next page I want to reference is page 13. And you'll see what we have here is the land use areas. Once again, this map has not changed as far as acreages or road networks or things that are previously proposed from what you saw before. What has changed is that we have designated those orange areas as commercial highway, and we still have 3 distinct types of use, mixed uses going on with our land use areas. And the densities that were proposed as we last were before you have not changed. The overall unit counts proposed multifamily and single family attached have not changed since we saw you last. So the next 2 pages I'm referencing are pages 14 and 15. And the reason I want to reference these pages goes back to what is permitted on all these different areas 1 through 7. And I believe we've come to a point that we've gone through each and every one of those uses with staff, and we're in agreement, and I believe they're in agreement. These are the types of uses that work in the gateway. And we wanted to eliminate anything that was not a use that might be permitted, say, in a commercial highway district, but not work in our master plan. So we've carefully crafted this list with feedback from the staff, and we have made all the revisions they requested us to make on those land uses. And we think that's very important because we think that, as Margaret Ann had mentioned, this is not just a typical commercial highway property. The next page I like to reference is page 17, and this is the requested exceptions that we made on the project. And really, the only reason I want to highlight this page is, once again, to go back to the understanding that we understand these exceptions have been reviewed with staff. We believe they're comfortable with these exceptions, and we want to make it clear that we are not asking for a different approach to the percentage of multifamily. What we are asking for is a change from part of the master plan from PUD to CH zone, but the overall acreages, the overall exceptions and land uses have not changed. We'd be glad to review any specifics of those land uses with staff or planning commission. So the next page I'm going to reference is page 20, and this really gets into the transportation network, and we know that it's a very important thing for not only this project but the surrounding land uses and the future land uses to work. I want to make it really clear that we've agreed to the schedule of the extension of Willow Oak Drive as to when that happens, and we believe staff has agreed that the timing of that is important and that the timing of that we have placed as a agreement in this pattern book is appropriate. And that is going to happen with what we call phase 2B of the townhomes. So area 2, which is the single family attached, when part of that gets developed, Willow Oak Drive will be extended to its full length and connect to Wilkinson Pike. We see that road really is going to function as providing a very important network from a transportation network for automobiles, and think that agreement is something that we fully understand has got to happen. The other thing I want to point out in this page is relative to the interchanges at Medical Center Parkway. I know there was some discussion with staff about making sure that we had all the left turn and right turn lanes synced up and that it worked with brakes in the median. And we've agreed to everything the staff has asked for at those intersections, because there again we know that the city has for a long time planned how those intersections will work and function, and we have agreed to that in the pattern book. The other thing we've agreed to is, Mr. O'Shea pointed out, is on Wilkinson Pike. We know that part of the improvements need to happen with Phase 1, and that includes the berm installation, and that also includes any kind of left turn lane motions that we need for Wilkinson Pike. And what we have agreed to is that we will either do those left turn lanes as part of the project in the first phase, or we will provide a fee in lieu of, in light of the fact that there might be a desire in the city's part to wait until the entire Wilkinson Pike improvements are made. But that's up to the city. We're in agreement to either do the left turn lanes or provide the fees in lieu. And we will continue to work with city staff on making sure that that fits with the future needs of the entire Wilkinson Pike improvements. The next page I'm going to reference is page 25 in your booklet. And once again, we want to make sure that it's clear that it's our understanding we have provided a very specific phasing sequence for all the public improvements related to this project, and the staff has agreed that this sequence makes sense and it's giving the city what is needed as far as the phasing of what we show. So one of the things that had been mentioned was the importance of Clary Lane, and you'll see in the center of the project, Clary Lane is extended over to the far right lower part of your page, which would be the southeast corner of the project. And Margaret Ann had mentioned a connection from that point over to Robert Rose Drive. We are in full agreement with allowing that connection to happen, and we have provided the connection point that is needed from our property. We have also provided a turnaround cul-de-sac in case that connection doesn't happen. And I think I want to make it real clear that we are all for the connection. We would love to see it happen, and we've given all the tools we can on our property to see it happen. But as far as the rest of that connection, that would have to be something that the adjoining property owner and the city would work out. So we've tried to give the proper geometry and the proper connection points for either scenario, and we would love to see the connection happen. But if it can't, we understand that there needs to be some way for a proper turnaround that's designed to meet city standards. We are going to provide both of those options. I think the other thing that we heard at the neighborhood meeting, and we've had further discussion with staff about, relates to Wilkinson Pike. And as much as they liked the architecture that was shown, the residential portions of the project that was shown, the one thing we heard as a concern was storm drainage. So we've been looking at how can we, with this project, improve some of those conditions on Wilkinson Pike. And I'm going to bring Mr. Wes McGill up, civil engineer who's working on the project, to explain a little bit of that. Might be helpful to pull page 25 back on the screen if we could.
Go ahead and put this in presentation mode. Oh, we lost it all. There we go. Wes McGill with Reagan Smith, the civil engineer representing the project. Like Kevin mentioned, yeah, we did hear some concerns from the adjoining property owners about some existing drainage problems along Wilkinson Pike, and kind of want to walk through with the Planning Commission our plans to address those. With on-site, what we can do is we're obviously going to be providing stormwater ponds, retention ponds, or detention ponds to manage our on-site stormwater that we're creating, making sure that our runoff rate is less than what it is today currently. And so we're going to manage that on our site. And then also the construction of the landscape buffer berm along Wilkinson Pike will kind of manage that water and hold it on our site. We'll release this pond into the roadside ditch that goes down Wilkinson Pike. We did learn by reviewing the 2010 flood aerials that they were great at showing what the issues are during larger storm events, and kind of the overall basin in this area kind of culminates down to a low point. It's in the Hale property adjacent to Clary Park, and that is eventually dammed up in its existing condition that wouldn't allow water to escape. So essentially all that water, the only route for it to go is to cross Wilkinson Lane and then over into the Manson Retreat subdivision. So we've agreed, and Hines has agreed, that in order to alleviate some of those issues that we can install a swale or roadside ditch to further define that, to allow that water to escape. And that would extend from the corner of our property where our detention pond is, down Wilkinson Pike, going under Willow Oak Drive, and then eventually daylighting out into the low-lying flood areas, floodplain areas along the battlefield. And that's just going to be our effort to get that stormwater that's creating issues for those residents away from their homes. And then eventually, I think with the improvements on Wilkinson Pike, there's going to be some stormwater tie-ins that will occur in the future that will take it further down to the battlefields from there as well. If you have any questions about stormwater, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I can turn it back over to Mr. Gunther.
Any questions on stormwater? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. McGill.
Thank you, Wes. And I think one of the things we're just trying to really point out is that we realize this project impacts the surrounding area. Wilkinson Pike is part of this project. We realize that, Hines Development has said we want to help the city improve not just what's happening in our property, but what's happening with the storm drainage that we heard was a concern, from those adjoining residents. We'll continue to work with staff. We'll continue to make sure whatever's designed, is appropriate. But that is an idea that I think the Hines Development team wanted to come up with and present to you tonight as just something that we realize is important. So next page I'd like to focus on is page 27. And the purpose of this, there really is not any big change to the green space connections and the pedestrian ways. But this is just to show that even with the change in commercial highway from what was part of the PUD before, the master plan is still very much intact. And the connection points that we think are so important for pedestrians and green space, those are still a part of the plan, and they haven't left with part of the PUD being removed. And this also speaks to, I think, the importance of how we feel that the pedestrian ways and the walkability of this plan is just as important as the automobile, and making sure that there are connections between land uses. All right, the next page we'll take a look at is page 35, and I think it's worth spending a little bit of time on this. As Margaret Ann had mentioned, we have made revisions to the site plan that is included in this current document, but this was our starting point, and I want to make sure to point out the things we've done in response to the staff, because we think the staff's comments were important and valid, and we have continued to craft this, even since Friday when we received those comments. So what you see is that we've reoriented a lot of these units along that main driveway the main drive that comes through the project. And that is something that we recognize is going to make a big difference in the way it feels as you're coming down the primary street. So we've accommodated that, and in places where you cannot have the front facing the street, that is where, as Ms. Green had mentioned, we are working on very specific details of a wraparound porch. And that would be, if you can see the mouse on the screen, that would be relative to these units right here that are facing along the drive. It would also be relative to even the units that are facing in the perimeter of the site, facing adjacent properties, and units here where you come in and where that side of the building is facing our primary street. So we've recognized that those side elevations have to be something special. I think we've given some really good design solutions, but we will continue to work with the staff at figuring out exactly what those need to be. And, you know, I think that it's recognized that this layout, it really starts to give you a really good feeling as you come down the street. And we would present the case that even sometimes having that side-oriented building, as long as the architecture is handled in a certain fashion, is not always a bad thing. It even creates a little bit of variety to that street experience. So we've worked very hard at providing those connections as far as the alleys go too. So what you see here has, as Margaret Ann mentioned, we had originally proposed hammerheads at the ends of these alleys. Those are gone. We've eliminated those, and we've connected a loop road that comes behind all the units. So at this stage, our site plan does not have any hammerhead or dead-end alleys, and we've allowed a loop or connection point around the backside of all the units. We also heard loud and clear, and I think it's a very valid point, that on the north side of the property, those townhomes that are oriented towards the Hale property would have headlights shining into the adjacent property if that alley were not screened. And so the developer has agreed to provide a fence, privacy fence at the end of those to make sure that we don't have any headlights that actually shine onto the adjacent property.
So, Mr. Gunther, can I ask
Yes.
a question on this page? So are you saying that you now have this, there's a roadway all the way basically around the exterior? And like, so what we're looking at, we do have the hammerheads here in our book.
That's correct.
And so you've changed that now. You have a revised
That's correct.
version of this?
So there are none of the current alley networks
Okay.
end in a hammerhead. They now all have a loop connection around the back and perimeters of the property.
Excellent. And in regards to the guest parking that we've talked about a little bit and Ms. Green mentioned.
Right.
You know, there is quite a bit on that one end. And there's a little bit in front of the amenity center, right?
Correct.
And I don't really see any more on the rest of this project.
That's a very good
Is that
point.
correct?
And the other thing that we provided Ms. Green with today was in the plan that I described where the hammerheads have been changed.
Okay.
We have on-street parking that is now included on that main drive. So that would be more on, you know, the northern portion or in front of where that pond area is.
Mm-hmm.
So that would distribute additional guest parking, on-street parking, which we thought was a good idea. That's now included in the site plan.
So on-street parking basically in front of the full detention or retention or whichever one it is area?
That's correct.
Is it parallel or is
It's
it?
parallel.
We're not too good at that, but.
I heard the new cars are pretty good at doing it themselves, so.
You know, but it's, you know.
So we've worked very hard at addressing all of those concerns. The hammerheads are gone. The predominant number of units now orient towards the front of the street. Those that don't, we're working on a wraparound porch detail that we think is going to really provide something special. And we have provided a privacy fence at those alleys that are oriented towards the Hale property.
And can you tell me what's the width on the sidewalks that are like going down each side of the main?
Those are currently, If I look at the street section, I believe those are 5-foot sidewalks. It'd be typical with the standard street section that you have for a local street.
Okay,
There is sidewalks provided on both sides.
very nice.
So we, as I said, we've been working hard at trying to really solve these design issues on the townhome area because we know that's important. We know there's been some ongoing questions. We feel like we've really come a long way to meet those, and we'll continue, as I said, to work with staff on those things. The other thing I think that we really want to highlight is with the site plan, part of the reason that we've done it the way we have is there's existing tree lines both sides of the property, along the Hale property and along what would be the northern portion facing our commercial lot. And we really wanted to save those tree lines and make that part of our open space and our green space. So we've continued to fight for that every time we change the layout to make sure that's part of what happens, because we know this has to be, once again, a quality place. The other piece that we feel is very important to that quality is the opportunity to make it a gated community, and so we've shown that as well, because we just know that that is something important to the home builder that's talked to us, is that is part of the quality level that you get when you're going for a high level, and that's allowing for those gated entrances. It feels more private, it feels more secure, but also still can connect to the surrounding areas. So before I go on, I did want to pause here and make sure we've answered questions, and I have, Ms. Jones, I have appreciated your questions. Is there any more questions about the townhome area? I know that's kind of been a big focus of this next round of revisions that we've made.
Because we're still getting ready to look at the actual elevations, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
So when you talk about the wraparound porches, I know you're on the main drawing, you talked about the ones on the right-hand side. Are you also looking at the ones on the left, towards the front? Where
Right. So if you look at, if I could have the screen on page 35 again, the ones, I believe, Mr. Russell, you're referring to these
Yes.
units over here? Yes, those two would also.
So you're looking at all the ones that are addressed.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything that's oriented to that street. And we're looking at making sure that detail really is, like I said, something special.
And I just want to go back to this parallel parking along this. So is it all the way from the entrance, all the way back to the amenity center, or, I mean, is it along that curved part of the road?
Right. So once again, if I could have on the screen that site plan, it's this stretch of roadway where once you come through the gate. Right. So I think we have a physical handout we can provide if that would help. But the on-street parking is going to start past our private gate here and extend along our private drive up until that amenity center, which we think is a good location because it, as you pointed out, there's some guest parking that occurs in this part of the site. We thought that would be something that would facilitate additional parking on this side of it. We can hand
I will
out.
just say, I'll want to hear what staff thinks about that addition now or later, but,
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So on to page 37, and we know this is a really important topic, which is the architecture. We have worked with an architect to really start looking at a lot of these details. We think that, with the variable roof lines, the porches, the columns, the eaves, the kind of details that we're showing with our dormer windows and railings, these are all very important, along with the mixture of materials that, of course, is, a color palette that is going to be not just all the same color on these facades, not all the same material. We have provided a materials image for each one of these particular types of styles that Ms. Green has. And there again, we'll continue to review that with her. We've also agreed to elevate the units 12 inches above finished grade to provide a little bit of that relief. We know that's an important thing, so that's something else we've agreed to. And as you see on this page, if you look at the far left image in the middle, it depicts part of what we see for that wraparound porch and how that starts to treat the edge of the house as something different than just a side elevation. The middle elevation is a good example of what the rears of these buildings would look like, and you can see there again, we don't feel like just because it's in the rear, it's devoid of detail. It still has a high level of detail, still provides some personal scale to that building. We really think that this is going to be a top-notch product and a top-notch architectural style, and something that'll bring really a new level to single-family attached to not only the Gateway but to the city of Murfreesboro. The other thing we've done is, as you see there's like the Southern traditional, the farmhouse, the craftsman styles. They're unified in some of their materials and how they feel and the scale, but we want variety, we want interest as well as unity. So we're working hard at making sure that you're not going to have a row of the same type of architectural styles. There'll be some variations and there'll be some interest and nuance along with the unity. So I know this has been something that's important. I'm happy to pause here if there are specific questions. In your patterns books, you will see some enlargements. If you go to page 39 through 41, we showed the same images, but just at a larger scale, so it might be a little bit easier for you to read. But on page 37 here, we kind of summarized all of those elevations onto one page, so you can kind of compare the different styles.
So 2 questions.
Yes, Mr. Halpern.
I just want to make sure I understand. On page 38, it outlines what is going to be considered enhanced side with wrap porch and enhanced side elevation. So these are the units that you are, is this being amended also, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That image is also being amended because this is based on our old site plan. So we provided Ms. Green and city staff with a revision to this that communicates directly to the new site plan we have.
And there's no reflection, please correct me if I'm wrong, there's no reflection of the wraparound porches that you are speaking of that I see in this?
In the pattern book, a good example, if you go to page 40, and you see that Southern traditional style home, and the image on the bottom of that page shows kind of where that wraparound porch is detailed around the corner of the home. That would be an example. If you look at the following, if you look at that same page, the top elevation, you'll see how that wraparound porch kind of from the front elevation fits in and then extends past the side elevation of the house.
So I'm just making a comment. So the side view, the enhanced side view, this wraparound porch doesn't go, of course, the length of the side that's against the street.
That's correct. It doesn't extend the entire length of that elevation. I think the intent is to bring that personal scale and break up, some of the facade and add a place where people could actually be outside and still be under, that comfort zone. But, it's not intended to extend the entire length of the house.
And on page 39, where it says shutters on interior units are optional on standard elevations.
Right, so when we call something an enhanced rear elevation, that has the shutters that you see there. There are some places internally within the project where those may be optional. So that's another thing we're trying to show with with our enhanced diagram. If you see the red lines on page 38, which relates to our old site plan, but it's still showing the idea. You see those red lines? Those are the places where the developer felt like it was really important to have that level of detail, and it may not be as important in some of the internal pockets.
So the optional is, whose option?
The optional for the rest of the units would be at the developer's option, yes. The areas that we're showing in that diagram would be a commitment that it would not be an option.
Okay, so the red is showing where you are committing to the shutters.
Yes, ma'am.
And the extra detail.
That's correct.
And the rest of them would not have the additional shutters and extra detail.
That's correct.
And maybe we're only talking about shutters, but yeah, I just think that's.
Yeah, it's just that the shutters are the only thing that would be different between what you see highlighted in red and what is not. The details in the garage doors, the different components of detailing in the facade, the changes in materials, the eaves and overhangs, those would all be a commitment that would happen throughout the whole project.
And so the shutters would still be there on the end units, just not on the two interior units of a building?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
So it's just, and that's what Mr. O'Shea was confirming with me, that is relative only to those two center units, not the end units.
Okay.
Okay, when you were talking before, you were describing, I'm on page 38, next to the pond on the right-hand side.
Yes, sir.
I thought those 4 units would have been green.
Right, and so I apologize because we've been working with staff. We've had a site plan change, and we've had a diagram change, and what you see in front of you is different. But what we've committed to is that those 4 units next to the pond, that would be a case where it'd be in green, where we have the wraparound porch.
Okay.
Any other questions before he continues?
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next page I'll refer to is page 42. This really hasn't changed since the last time we were before you. We just think it's really important, though, to show how no matter what kind of layout we have in that area 2, we're still committed to these, what we call the mews, or the common greens between the front of the units, and how that still fits within our current site plan. And this illustrative is showing how that space would feel. So we just wanted to commit that that hasn't gone away with the change in our site layout. Same thing for page 43. With the site layout change, we wanted to demonstrate that we're looking very hard at where the parking fits, where the sidewalks fit, everything to the HVAC locations, the particular units that would be where you see the little box into the units is actually where the HVAC unit is worked into the recess of the facade. So some of those are very well hidden. We've been working very closely with the requirements we know we're going to need for electrical, for storm drainage, for all the other utility connections, just to make sure that it fits. We want to make sure it can be built, and we're committed to doing that.
So Kevin, back to page 42.
Yes.
And Margaret Ann may need to, is this, Margaret Ann, where you were talking about the fact that there's no front porches and that there's no place for people to hang out? Because in the back, it's garages and all that kind of stuff?
That's right. The back is, I think probably page 43 shows a little bit more what the backs are, and that really is just alley, parking
Right.
spaces, and utility structures.
Right.
And so the area in between becomes their extension of livable space, and oftentimes in townhomes you'll see a back patio, and that doesn't exist here. So there is a lot of common area in these fronts, but what I'm suggesting is that people may want to have a place that's comfortable for them to sit on and to enjoy. And so I think it's a little better maybe reflected in the elevations. So I don't know, like if you look at page 40 and you look at those porches, that the top image is what will face those mews. And is that a design that's conducive to having chairs there and little side table, maybe some pots, because that is their space. And so what I'm suggesting, like if you look at those two middle units, I know that that they've said that they're committing to porches being 6 feet wide, but you can see that that's only maybe displayed on the end units. But I'm also thinking depth is important, because when you sit down or you have chairs, you have to have a place to sit. So oftentimes porches can be just an aesthetic thing and really some time in the back, in your backyard. But I think in this case, people are spending their time in the front. They may be just wanting to sit in their own space and watch people outside, but this is their outside space. And sure, there's open space, but you're not going to go to the pool constantly. You may just want to sit outside for a while. So that's why I think I'm spending so much time emphasizing the porch design there. And I do think that there's some room for improvement. This plan is what was submitted for the packet, and so they've talked about some changes, and I alluded to those changes as well that they want to make, and you very well may want to see those. Like I said, they were emailed to me, I think, this morning, which does show some changes, but I still do have some concerns. And I know it could seem small, but committing to elevating the porches to 1 foot or 12 inches is essentially that much. And maybe that's okay for some of the porches, but I've taken some time to review developments similar, not the same to this, and I really think that is important in the overall aesthetic, especially when you have slab houses. And I get that that's what we have in Murfreesboro, but like that is 12 inches. That could be two stairs, and so some of the images show that, but I really think they could do a little more, because those spaces are basically their outdoor space, their extension of their outdoor space.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Margaret, in the previous plan, did they have the outdoor patios, like what they're showing here?
I think
So
this
on
is
page 42,
42.
yeah, they show right in front of the porches, there's an outdoor patio space.
Yeah, in front of the porches, they have the benches. Is that what you're talking about?
No. In addition to the benches, in front of the porch, they show on the left-hand side of 42.
Oh, right, yeah.
The
I saw the
outdoor
word
patios.
patio, and I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about, because they have covered porches, and they had outdoor patios with seating area. But what it's pointing to looks like maybe landscaping. I haven't had anybody mention outdoor patios to me at all, but I imagine what that really is just the porch of those two units that I said were probably not 6 wide. That's what I think that those probably are, because you can see the doors.
Okay. Well, you guys might want to talk to that.
Yeah, so it's that lower left-hand picture. I'm not sure I understand that footprint, what that really is, where you I guess, step out on the porch, and then it looks like there is a little seating area kind of out in the yard, maybe? So maybe that is a patio, is that right?
So we've developed these homes on Muse many times before. And it's a tremendous detail. It provides an incredible living experience for the people that live here. We've been doing this for 25 years and developed incredible communities throughout the Southeast, and this will be one of them, I guarantee you that. So what we've done is where you have units that are on the corners, those typically have the porches, because we want to emphasize the architectural detailing on the corner of the building. And those porches will be a minimum of 6 feet deep. So Mr. Blumley can stretch his legs out and make sure he can sit there. That's kind of the standard. The architects we've worked with, the architects that David works with know that, and we design that appropriately every time. What we've done on the units that are on the interior, those don't have a porch. Most of those have a stoop. So we've got a covered stoop so you walk in under the rain while you're waiting for ringing the doorbell so you can enter the house. But what we've provided for then is an outdoor patio seating area adjacent to that. So that would have hard pavers, some landscaping around it, because we want to provide that front yard privacy and encourage people to live to the front. This is all about the interaction with your neighbors. That's what new urbanism and traditional neighborhood design is about. It's about encouraging people to live to the front of the house, live to the street, so that you're promoting those spontaneous interactions between community members that really creates that sense of community. That's what we do in all of our projects, and we're experts at that, and that's what these muses will provide. So every unit will have an outdoor seating area that's private to those residents, in addition to the park spaces that will have park benches and landscaping and fire pits and grill spaces and things like that. Again, all of those elements are important to encouraging that interaction. And obviously, when we get to the site planning detailing of all of that, that's when that will all be detailed out completely.
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that, because when I looked at this picture on the right on 42, I didn't see any of the, it's just.
Yeah, it's just diagrammatic, yeah, right.
But
right.
thank
We're
you.
just trying to give you a sense of the feel for it.
Right.
That's why the buildings are white, they're not actual, but we wanted to show in that blow up to the left, that's how that, the people will be able to utilize that space and have both private space that's theirs, adjacent to their house. That'll probably have, some low fencing and landscaping, but then also have the public space where they can interact with one another.
How wide is that formal yard, or formal lawn?
I think the spacing between the buildings is 30, I thought it was more. 10-foot setback, so it's 50 total? So it's 50 feet face to face. So a building to building. So, if you have a porch extending into that, that would take up 5 or 6 feet of that. And so, then you would have, 38 feet between the two front porches, and then 50 feet when there's not a porch. So the lawn space itself would probably be 15 to 20 maybe. We may have one sidewalk, we may have two sidewalks. That detail will be kind of worked out. We might have one meandering sidewalk through areas, and some of those park spaces will probably vary.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. O'Shea, appreciate it.
So the last couple of pages that I will refer to, page 44, this is for area, what we call area 6, so the single-family attached townhomes, and I'm simply highlighting this to show that with our revised changes to the master plan as far as commercial and the other things, this has not changed. This is the same thing that was in your previous book and the same architecture that we've committed to in the past. And likewise, on page 46 and 47, this relates to the multifamily. And there again, the architecture, the amenities, none of that has changed from what we had shown in the previous pattern book, and we feel like it's very important to commit to the design that we're showing as part of the multifamily. So I appreciate the opportunity to walk through all this with you. I know it's a lot, but as we said, this is very important, and we want to be able to make sure to answer all your questions, and would hope that after the public hearing, if there are any additional questions, we are available for those as well.
So I got one for you.
Yes, sir.
I think I heard, maybe in Margaret Ann's presentation, that the multifamily might have commercial at the bottom. Is that a correct statement or no?
That is correct. And if you look at page 50 in your pattern book, you will see where that occurs on the site plan. And the idea, as we mentioned, Clary Lane is really kind of this place of commerce and open space and activity. And we recognize that fronting the office towards that portion of the site as you first come in would be a very appropriate place to do it. So those two corners of the buildings in Area 5 are committed to a minimum of 4,000 square foot of commercial office. And there's just an image there that you can see how that would work into the architecture, how they could fit at street level. Did that answer your question, Mr. Halliburton?
Any further questions before we open the public hearing? Thank you very much for
Thank you.
providing the book. Made it very nice
Yeah.
to follow along. We appreciate that. Okay, we will open the public hearing and ask if we have anyone here tonight that would like to come speak either for or against this application. Okay. We will close the public hearing. And then see what other comments and questions and thoughts we have from the Planning Commission. Or staff, if they wanted to add anything else on based on what we'd heard tonight.
I'll be glad to. Let's see, I took quite a few notes here. The program book that we have, that we based the public hearing on, is what you have in your book. I'm glad to hear that they wanted to make changes and they emailed them about to me, but I needed them to state in the record tonight that that was indeed what they wanted to do. And so I think it's important that you heard that there are some changes they want to do. We as staff, of course, haven't had time to fully vet or review those changes, although absolutely getting rid of hammerheads, it was in my comments, and it's something I feel important about, or feel is very important. It's something that we would value. So we definitely want to see that, and it would need to be incorporated in the book. And so I just want to be clear why what you have is different than what they're saying today, is because this was what was submitted on the deadline. This is what, when we advertised, it was based on, and of course our comments. And some of those comments, like the architecture, some of what they were proposing facing the street really was just shutters. And I've said several times that that's not enough, at least in my opinion, it's not enough. And so it sounds like they're wanting to go back and work on that as well, which I appreciate. There was some questions about, I think, the restrictive covenants, and for years you all have heard us talk about those. They can be effective tools, but they're certainly not tools that planners can utilize. I'm sure our city attorney might be able to decide whether he wants to go to court and enforce something like that, but if you're calling our office and you get one of our junior planners on the phone and ask for the list of uses permitted, they're going to reference what's in the zoning ordinance because that's how it works. Certainly they can be written so the city can be a party to that, and we could enforce them, but for example, the berm, which we could also enforce, we haven't done yet for a variety of reasons. It doesn't mean we won't do it tomorrow. It just means that that's not a tool that planners use, and so that's why I don't want to give like false confidence in them. I think that they're useful and they're helpful, but it's certainly not something that Margaret Ann can enforce those restrictive covenants. The City of Murfreesboro, our legal department, would opine upon that and make their decision, so I wouldn't want to substitute my judgment for them. There were some questions about a possible ditch along Wilkinson Pike. We heard about that today. It could be a workable solution. Of course, it's in the right-of-way, and we would want to consult with our city attorney, or not city attorney, city engineer. We don't want to consult with the city attorney when it comes to drainage. And so, Mr. Griffith, we'd want to see what he thinks about that. I think that there have been some minor improvements to drainage throughout the years. You, as Planning Commission, have heard time and time again about the concerns either from the battlefield or from the residents. They do have water that comes on their property that they have spoken to us about. It may be possible, but I wouldn't want tonight for you to walk away from tonight's meeting saying, like, that's what's going to happen, because I really think we need an opportunity to consider the matter and consider it with our public infrastructure staff, who really are in charge of maintaining public rights of way. But it sounds like it could possibly work, especially since it's temporary, because, you know, in the future, the street will be rebuilt. There'll be the berm, there'll be the gateway streetscape elements, there'll be right-sized culverts under the road, and, but until then, it could be a temporary solution. The parking, they were able to add some on-street parking, which I think works pretty well, especially on roads where there's more traffic. I prefer in those scenarios parallel spaces as opposed to 90-degree spaces, because if I can have a choice to not have you back into a major road, it's preferable in my opinion. It's not always the case. In some cases we are okay with backing into the road, but I did suggest that they have those parallel spaces because I think it is it's easier on those major roads. On roads that have very little traffic, the 90-degree spaces tend to not be as much of a problem because you're not conflicting with through traffic.
And did you feel like that added enough additional parking on that end of the development?
So I haven't had much time to look at it. My initial reaction with Mr. Huddleston was that we think it could be distributed more throughout the development. And so even still, we think that it could be better distributed in the development. And they mentioned the tie-in to the adjacent bank and saying they're making a way for it, but that it would be, just to clarify, they're saying that the city and the Redstone would be responsible for making that connection. And I'm not sure how we can negotiate that in the future, but that's something that we've struggled with, is we really think that that's, with this new design and new master plan, that it's important.
You lost me there. Are you saying that it can't be done, or it can be done, or are you saying it should be up to them to do it, or should be up to another party to make that happen?
I'm saying we really want it, and I am saying what I heard them say is, oh, well, we have a place for it. If you really want it, you can make it happen. So I don't think they're taking on the commitment to, even if it's off their site and onto the Redstone Bank, there needs to be work on the bank site. So what I heard was the city and Redstone can do that connection on the other side, but they would make a place for it. And when it gets in those sort of partnerships, I tend to rely on Mr. Huddleston and see how that can work. So what I heard them say is, sure, we'll make it available, but we're not interested in going on somebody else's property to do it. And sometimes we ask for developers to make improvements off their property to make the connection. I just know that it is a point that has our engineers in the city have brought to my attention several times and still want me to emphasize as being important, especially considering the other two connections are going away that we were anticipating. But just to clarify what I heard their team say,
Well, that's something we can address. I just want to make sure I understood what you were saying.
I think we agree that the plans match the progression of work. What I should have done with my introduction, and I'm glad that Kevin did it, was to highlight the exceptions. And he's right, most of those exceptions we either suggested, like the porches projecting the setbacks, or most of them were in agreement with. I did not offer opinion on the exception to density because I think it's really a question that the Planning Commission and City Council will need to opine upon. So the area of land that's devoted to residential, it's semantics, say it one way or the other. The way I say it is, the only residential uses permitted in the gateway are apartments, and they're restricted 25%. So I think the way it was restated was, well, we still meet that, but we also have an additional percentage of townhomes. Well, I'm saying residential is all residential, so that's the difference, and it's, I think, just the semantics and how you present it. I'm saying the only residential allowed there is multifamily, and that's restricted to 25%. Sure, the multifamily is restricted to 25%, but they have some additional residential. And I don't think that's a point that I have to get stuck on, but I do want to emphasize that the plan development does ask for an exception to the density. The density is maxed out at 25 dwelling units per acre. And so each of their apartments will exceed that. They'll be closer to 30 for the property the apartments are on. So the acres of the apartments, I think that overall density, of course, will be lower, but the density for each of the 2 different apartments will be more than 25%. And I just didn't want, I didn't say that was a good thing or a bad thing, because I really think it's a decision that the policymakers in our community will have to wrestle with and come up with an answer for, but I just thought I might want to put that out there for you. You know, architectural is important to me. I don't quite think they're there. I know that they feel good about the product that they presented, and, you know, of course, I'm open to what you think, but I still think that the details are what make the difference, and I don't quite think they're there for the gateway. I think there's more work they can do, but I do acknowledge they've done some things from then till now to help address our concerns. It's just like for the outdoor patio, some things that I just don't understand. And they're not incorporated in any of the other developments that we've reviewed in Tennessee. I'm sure other communities have embraced that, but I feel like Murfreesboro is my community, and I'd like to know what Murfreesboro wants, and so that's sort of the feedback that I give is this is what we value as important. Were there any other questions that I missed? I have a lot of notes, but.
One question for me would be around green space. When you look at the apartments, we're always talking about how much green space is needed. How are we, if you look at the green space percentage, how is it?
So they have not asked for an exception to our formal open space requirement in the gateway or to our design guidelines. And the way it's written now is you have to provide a minimum of 5% for all the residential development. They're showing some amenity area that they're designing, hoping that it would attract more people than just the apartment goers, so people who live in the townhomes might come over but even if this plan doesn't show it, they will have to provide at least 5% of the developable area and formal open space, not just green space or open space, so no counting detention ponds, but actual amenity areas, so seat walls and gazebos and those sorts of elements. In the initial plans, I didn't see any real formal open space for the townhomes area too, and so they've added the pool, which I think is something for a high-end development, a minimum sort of thing that you would expect to see. So that is an area two. The other townhomes don't show the formal open space, but because they're not asking for an exception, they're going to have to come up with something when they come back at site plan. So 5% is the minimum, is the answer to that.
Okay.
So do you think what we will need to have is, will we need to have a plan book with the changes that have been discussed, that they've talked about and said that they intend to make or have made, in a book for us to be able to actually approve, possibly at our next meeting? Is that what you think needs to happen with any other feedback that we might have from any of the rest of the Planning Commission on any other changes they might want to see or any other concerns they have? Or are you, well, I have no idea whether anyone would feel like this is something we could vote on at this point to pass along. I think it needs to be just a few more steps. We're really close because we've done a lot of work and getting really, really close. But this particular, what we're looking at tonight is not the actual plan that we could approve and pass along. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Sure, of course. I think you have options, and we, staff, will do whatever it is that you ask us to do and make it work. In the past, with these sorts of changes, the Planning Commission has wanted to see it before passing it on to City Council. I guess there is a scenario where you could just list the changes if you felt like you could visualize them in your head and didn't really need to see them in the book. And you could, if you wanted changes, you could make a motion subject to all these other things, and we would have to make sure that they're there before City Council. I tend to be more comfortable with you saying, these are the changes we'd like to see, and we'd like to see the plan before going to city council, especially on something that's rather large. If it were something like add 4 parking spaces, I would say,
Right,
I'm
right.
sure I can make that happen. In any case, I think I can do what you'd ask, but I think it would be consistent with what you've done in the past for you to want to see the changes we've talked about today with the connectivity and those other elements.
I do feel like with this larger plan, and there's just still several things that I think we need to see, in writing in front of us, as opposed to us sitting here and trying to have a motion that has 15 things that we want to see subject to, and we can let Mr. Ives or you reel it all off for us, and we can say, okay, so moved. But I think that's more than the normal that we put into a motion, even though I certainly feel like, we've come a long, long way on this very large project, and we appreciate all the hard work and effort, certainly by the design team, development team, and of course our fabulous staff. But that's kind of my thoughts, and whatever the rest of the planning commission.
I would agree with Kathy, but I also want to say, Kevin and everybody else here, Mr. O'Shea, y'all have come a long way with respect to specifics that, and I'm kind of a black and white person. Once I see it and I understand it, then that's something that I can vote on. And y'all definitely made huge progress of what this, I think what direction that we've all asked you to do. I do think that we, I just use page 38 as an example. We're saying that this is what it was originally, but we're doing something, we are dedicating ourselves or committing to do something different than that. I really like to see that, in the end. So if there's any way that we could get a plan book that would have all these changes that you have committed to, and then also give you a little time to work with Margaret Ann on some of her, not issues, but suggestions, I guess is the best way to say it. I think that would be in everybody's best interest.
I'll weigh in as well. I just want to say, Margaret, and I know this has been a big project, and obviously your detail and work is evident from the standpoint of, the presentation that you gave. And I think there's been, to just reiterate on what others have said, it appears that the more time you all spend together, the better this becomes. And so, I agree. I think some more time should be spent. I do want to comment on specifically the townhouse use and separating that out from the multifamily and how that's looked at. I don't personally have the concerns over the density on the multifamily, especially, in the discussion about adding the for sale townhouses. So, I feel really good about that, and I think that's good for, the gateway. I think it's good for the avenue. I think the rooftops to support the commercial is a positive thing, and vice versa. But I do think, too, in the points that you have made with the investment that we've made in the gateway and the standards that we want to hold to, I do think it's important to do that residential piece correctly, and for us to have the information that we feel comfortable with on paper making a decision. So, from the standpoint of the product that needs to be there, it'd just be my opinion that it needs to be a premium product, and we need to feel really good about that, especially considering the other things we're trying to do there. And so I will encourage you as well to spend some more time together to get further along, but I'm very supportive of what you're doing. So,
And I would agree with that comment too.
I definitely echo that. I think the team has come a long way. I think that all of the additions that you guys have done and what you've talked about doing, reflecting that to us, will help us make a good, positive decision.
Can we just address timing
Yep.
on that?
Absolutely.
we've already frankly have the pages, the swapped out pages that we would need to, the changes we'd need to make to the site plan and to where we're having the enhanced sides. I know there's a handful of pages that will need to be changed. I mean, we can have those swapped out and, back to staff with Kevin in a couple days. So we'd really like to be able to come back to the next meeting on, I think it's the 16th, is that the date? To be able to, keep this moving forward. I know Mr. Gatton and Mr. Smith are eager to see us make progress.
I think that certainly, we don't know what all the deadlines are that the staff has to meet. So is there any way we can make that happen, Ms. Green?
And I can probably say them in my sleep. I've learned to answer like an attorney. It depends. And it depends on how quickly they can get the revised book to me. But if they can get it 2 days,
Mr. Ives
certainly.
teach you that.
I should give it to Mr. Ives and Mrs. McGannon.
Okay.
Yeah. But if they can get the turned around to me in a couple of days, then certainly I think that the 16th, it could be on the agenda for the 16th.
Okay.
Of course, that's out of my control because them responding is not something I can control.
Exactly. So
if we get it in by Friday, Monday? Submit by Monday, and we'll be on the 16th?
Negative.
Yeah, Monday.
Monday's
Labor
You're
Day.
welcome to come to City Hall and drop it off. Where do you live? In Atlanta?
Yeah.
Sure. I just got probably 12 plans in today, so I'm sure I can be busy until they get it in. That works for me. So if you
that
wanted
okay?
to defer it until the 16th, that's fine. And if they're not ready, I'll tell you at that meeting that they could not get it in order. Although if they're committed to working and they're on camera saying that they are, then I certainly can turn it around.
thank you.
Okay. We'll submit by Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Move for deferral.
Love a long weekend.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to defer this to the 16th. And that is with getting the revised plans to staff by Tuesday, which will be the 8th. And so motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you all very much. And so we'll leave these books up here. I don't know if you're going to change them all out, but again, thank you all very much for providing those. We do appreciate it. Okay, we will move on to our next item. It's a revision to amendment of McKnight Park Master Plan. City of Murfreesboro Legal Department is the applicant, Mr. Ives.
Ms. Green, can you help me change this screen?
I've got it up on this one, David, if you want it.
Escape. That's the key. And then Matthew actually can be your ice speaker, right?
Okay.
Or you
So
can just,
If,
someone take it out. Oh, I mean, there you go.
that's the one. All right. If we can, okay. If we can bring the picture up. Several years ago, we had an amendment.
All right, I'll hold it.
Do you want me to take a break?
No, go ahead.
There we go. Several years ago, we had an amendment, the McKnight Park Master Plan. That amendment is on the screen now. This area here in yellow, approximately 6 acres, was declared surplus property. The intent at the time was that it would be sold to a developer for development. Since that time, a number of things have happened. One of the expectations at that time was right here where my little hand is, that would be a maintenance facility for McKnight Park, would be constructed about there. This amount of parking here would stay roughly as it was. And now if I can escape out of this, I don't see an escape button coming up. Oh, that escaped. All right, then. Okay, if we can have the screen come up on that now. Okay, this is an overhead of the current airport area and a portion of McKnight Park. The area that we're talking about is not outlined here, but it's roughly this area right here, if you can follow the cursor. When the original area when it was originally declared surplus and the master plan was amended, it was expected that this road would continue, and this road where I am now is still there. It was expected that that road would continue as it is today, down this area, come along through here, through another parking lot, into the airport, and then be able to exit on Airport Road. That would be a back access for emergency vehicles. It would also be an exit when there's a large crowd and the crowd is trying to disperse. Some of the people could go that way. That's the way the road is today, and it was expected that that would continue that way. Two big things have happened since then. Well, actually three. One is TDK has built this hangar over here at the north end of the airport area. That has changed the dynamic of the development of the airport, and we're now we've got more commercial operators looking at hangars up in this general area that's still vacant. The second thing that happened is that instead of building the maintenance facility over in this area, the maintenance facility was built here where it is today. And the third thing that has happened is that as the development that has occurred along Memorial, as that developed, those businesses and those developers wanted a back access. And so they were willing to build. It's not dedicated open as a public street at this point, but they have built this driveway to this point. That is on park land, and we intend that to stay park land. What we intend to do is continue this road to the north up here, and then it will connect. It'll connect these future businesses as they develop along Memorial, and it will be a gated entrance into the park. It'll provide a much better escape route, if you will, from the park, because they'll come straight down to was that Colonel to that driveway at the north side of Walmart, rather than having to go through the airport property and wind around through the airport property and come out to Airport Road. So we think that's beneficial to the park to change that the back road from the park, if you will, to change it from the airport side of this property over to the Memorial Boulevard or the commercial development side of the property. Effectively, what we're doing is shifting the approximately 6 acres from hugging the back property lines of the property that fronts Memorial, shifting it over to hug the back property line of the airport property. So fundamentally, it's still approximately the same amount of acres remains as excess property. We are in the process of the 6F conversion. We're getting close to having the application ready to submit to the state and federal agencies. This property is restricted by grants that the federal government and state governments have given to us for the development of McKnight Park, and we have to have their permission to use it for any other purpose other than outdoor recreation or for park purposes. So we're in the process of doing that now. The expectation is that, assuming we're successful in getting the restriction lifted, that this approximately 6 acres will be incorporated into the airport and will be primarily developed with hangars, probably the T-hangar type developments. So we thought there has been enough changes that we should change the master plan to reflect what is actually happening today. So with that, I guess as a master plan amendment to the park, it does require a public hearing, which we've scheduled for tonight. So with that, I think we're ready. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
David, did I hear you say it's a gated entrance?
Yes, there would be a gate. It would be open during the daytime.
Okay.
But we would be able to gate it at night.
I'm with you.
And it would, of course, be, if there's an event going on, the gates would stay open, but at nighttime, when the park is closed, we could gate that so that
Okay.
there wouldn't be
I understand that.
easy access to the park. And the other thing that this would provide is park participants, visitors, whatever, with the food facilities going in, they now will have an easier access to get a hamburger, a hot dog, a chicken sandwich, or a snow cone of some kind. So that'll be good for the business there, and it will be good for our park visitors to have that option too. So be happy to answer any other questions if there are.
Questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Ives. We will open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item. And not seeing anyone, we will close the public hearing and ask for any questions, comments, and/or motions from the Planning Commission.
I'll make the motion to approve and let Mr. Williams go home for the night since he's been very patiently waiting in the back of the room. He drew the short straw for sure tonight.
I'll
All
second.
right. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes.
Thank you.
Now, we have two more items. Thank you very much. Thank y'all for being here. And we have two more items, but we also have a request for a very short recess. 5 minutes. 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Since we have a limited number of members here, so we are in recess for 2 minutes. We cannot do Okay. Thank you very much for that short recess. Our next item will be a mandatory referral and right-of-way abandonment to consider the abandonment of a portion of Esther Lane right-of-way, Mid-South Property Acquisitions, LLC, and the City of Murfreesboro Planning Department applicants. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. So this is a request for an abandonment of right-of-way along the north and south sides of Esther Lane for approximately 691 linear feet and 10 feet in width. The request is to open up a public hearing, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Rush? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody that would like to come forward to speak. Don't think we have anybody left tonight, so we will close the public hearing. Is there any other comments, or questions, or a motion from the Planning Commission?
I would mention that there are recommended conditions of approval in the staff comments, and we would ask that your approval be made subject to those.
Thank you, Mr. Blumley.
I'll make a motion we approve subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. That concludes our public hearings for tonight. Under staff reports and other business, we do have one item. It is the mandatory referral for the disposition of the Evergreen Cemetery property located along Greenland Drive. City of Murfreesboro Legal Department is the applicant. Mr. Ives.
Thank you again. The city has been involved with the operation of the Evergreen Cemetery for many, many years. I'm not sure when it first started, but it was before the beginning of the 20th century, and we're now in the 21st. So it's been a long time. Back in 1949, the city created the Evergreen Cemetery Commission and transferred this property to the commission. The effect of that transaction and the validity of that has been questioned over time, but it's stayed as it was, and the city's still involved. The city does appoint the commissioners, but the cemetery has been operated substantially independently by the commission since that time. A couple of years ago actually, the city had a management review consultant come and take a look at the operation of the cemetery and the city's involvement. And the upshot of that was that the consultants recommended that the city either complete a transfer of the property and completely transfer the property and the business of operating the cemetery to a private entity, or that the city fully bring Evergreen Cemetery back into the city and then hire someone or company to operate it essentially as an enterprise fund with a separate segregated fund outside the city's general funds, akin to how the Water Resources Department operates and how Murfreesboro Electric Department used to operate. And as staff reviewed that and management administration reviewed that, the decision was that it's preferable to sell the cemetery, to complete the transfer, and to have it operated as a private independent entity, completely independent of the city. And so that is in process. There's discussion toward that. It would effectively be a sale of the business, the assets that the Cemetery Commission uses, the tractors, trucks, things of that nature, office equipment that they have would all be transferred to a new Tennessee nonprofit corporation that has been established. At least some of the board members currently on the commission would be on the new board. The city would not be involved in selecting those people. A part of that would be, of course, to make sure the transfer of this property is complete, transferred to the new entity. And so for that, we ask Planning Commission to recommend approval of the city transferring its interest in this cemetery property, and that's what we had up on the screen a little bit ago is a survey of the approximately 80 acres that constitutes the Evergreen Cemetery property. All of that property would continue to be a cemetery. There'd be no change in use, but it would be managed completely by an independent private agency. Be happy to try to answer any questions. I would tell you that I have not been personally involved in the negotiations for the terms of the transfer and how all that will work out. Others have done that, but I was asked to handle this part of it, and I did obtain a new survey of the property from Huddleston Steel here recently, so that we know exactly what there is. And by the way, there are at least two. The transfer, of course, be subject to any and all easements, anything of record, and anything that's actually there. There are two sewer lines, one that follows the creek across that property, and then there's another line that's down at the corner of the property that's not in a recorded easement, but we would retain the easements for those sewer lines. Be happy to try to answer any questions.
And so you will just be looking to us tonight for an approval of the disposition of the property?
I'm asking that you recommend approval of the transfer of the property by the city to the nonprofit corporation.
Questions?
If there are none, I'll make a motion to approve the transfer or the recommendation to the city council.
Second.
And subject, as you said, to any and all.
I'm sorry?
Subject to all of your comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Subject to all staff comments.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ives. All right, any other staff reports or business? Okay, we stand adjourned. Yay.